Hokage, Chronicle of the True Farewell. Hey! Look who's back for more adventures. We love having you here to continue this story that keeps us all awake. Important note, all of this is pure fiction, so don't try any techniques you hear here in real life. Your neighbor might call the cops. This amazing novel and all its rights belong to the original author. We're just the ones giving it voice and drama. Are you enjoying the show? Prove it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and leaving that like that motivates us so much. And if you want VIP access to exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting with things you won't find anywhere else. Chapter 201. What? I still need to teach him how to beat me? Compared to Minato, Uchiha Chi undoubtedly possessed a far superior physique. While both suffered serious injuries, with Kushina stabbing Minato in the face and requiring him to remain bedridden for 3 months, Uchiha Chi, relying on his immortality, the forbidden technique of flesh reincarnation, and his newly acquired tailed beast physique, had seemingly grown back the 2 arms he'd lost in his own self-inflicted calamity. This stamina, fresh out of bed and ready to jump, was a source of envy to Minato, who lay dead on the hospital bed beside him. Soon, under the watchful eyes of Jiraiya and Minato, Uchiha Chi followed Aburame Ryoma out of Konoha Hospital, heading south. They passed the entrance to the Ninja Academy and arrived at the Hokage building beneath the massive cade rock. However, Aburame Ryoma didn't immediately take him to the Hokage's office, as a ninja would report on a mission. Instead, he went to the second floor of the Hokage building, entering a lounge-like space lined with cabinets and centered with a sofa, bench, and table. You can see a pile of playing cards scattered around on the square table. Uchiha Chi suddenly realized that this was probably where Hatake Kakashi worked after becoming an Anbu in the Kakashi arc of the original manga. Being able to play cards while working in the Anbu seemed like a lucrative job. No wonder Might Guy was so desperate to join the Anbu, he must have wanted to play cards here with Kakashi every day. This is where the Anbu teams check in. Theoretically, we root members are also members of the Anbu. Aburame Ryoma walked in front, explaining as he led Uchiha Chi to a wardrobe by the window. He took out a key and tossed it to Uchiha Chi. This wardrobe is yours from now on, put on the clothes inside, and then follow me. Uchiha Chi took the key, opened the wardrobe, and saw 3 sets of Anbu ninja uniforms neatly stacked inside. These uniforms were of 2 types in the original manga, probably distributed seasonally. The 3 outfits before Uchiha Chi were each different. One was a short vest, predominantly black, from top to bottom. His arms were exposed, and the silver vest over it was conspicuous. Other protective gear included armor, knee pads, and thick-soled, open-toed ninja boots. Another was a long vest, similar in style, except that it covered more. And the last one, a sultry, midriff-bearing outfit similar to the one worn by Sai in the original novel. Suddenly, Aburame Ryoma approached with a sultry smile, pointing at the 3rd outfit and saying, "You have to wear this. This is the one you should wear." "Absolutely not." Uchiha Chi stared at the revealing, sultry outfit with a look of horror. If he wore this to meet Madarumi and Hidden, he'd be laughed at for the rest of his life. Uchiha Chi gritted his teeth, raised his hand to push away his sullen boss's surprised face, grabbed the same Anbu uniform as Kakashi's and put it on, then grabbed the blue striped cat mask already in his closet and put it on. Then, with an expressionless face, he turned to Aburame Ryoma and said, "Let's go." Aburame Ryoma smiled faintly and put on a mask as well, but he didn't rush. Instead, he sat on the sofa in the lounge and waved to Uchiha Chi. "No rush, we still have to wait for one more member." As Aburame Ryoma spoke, a small white snake suddenly slithered out from the corner of the lounge, climbed onto the square table, and spit out a scroll towards the 2 of them. "Is this a messenger snake?" Uchiha Chi was slightly taken aback, then immediately recognized the snake. He looked at Aburame Ryoma in surprise and asked, "What are you and Orochimaru up to now?" Aburame Ryoma didn't respond, simply unfolding the scroll and glancing at it. His gaze narrowed slightly, and a smile crept into his face beneath his mask. Time passed, and soon the door to the lounge opened, and a timid little head poked in. "Hello, Aburame Ryoma-sama, and Shura-sama, I'm Kabuto." Hearing the voice, Uchiha Chi raised an eyebrow and looked over, startled. The man was dressed in a fluffy black combat uniform, an Anbu vest, a brown slash, and a Konoha forward protector. He was a head shorter than Uchiha Chi. Gazing at this familiar face, Uchiha Chi was stunned. This person was none other than Yamato, the second ninja in Konoha village to master wood release since the ninja god, Hoshirama Senju. At this point, Yamato hadn't yet experienced his encounter with Kakashi, the demise of the Ivory clan, or his recruitment by the third Hokage and the name Tenzo. He still bore the name Ka given to him by Danzo. Ka, in the root, also signifies the most exceptional ninja. But why would Danzo send this precious child here? Placing a wood-released ninja before an Uchiha? Was he trying to show off? Yo, you're punctual. Aburame Ryoma stood up from the sofa, grabbed Ka and pushed him in front of Uchiha C. From today on, Uchiha C, this guy is your subordinate. Uchiha C looked up, bewildered, and stared at the little carrot standing before him, his bewilderment growing even greater. The world seemed to grow ever more magical. Aburame Ryoma coughed, nudged Uchiha C, who was still in a daze, and said seriously, "Don't underestimate this little guy. He has a power that the entire ninja world fears." Would release. Uchiha C scratched his head. He knew this information a long time ago, but in order to match Aburame Ryoma's serious expression, he pretended to be surprised, and then asked in surprise, "So, why did you send him here? Follow me to Hell Valley to die? At his age, he should not have the ability to complete such an S-level mission, right?" At this time, in front of two seniors with powerful battle records who could even complete legendary tasks such as killing the leader of the enemy village behind enemy lines, the young Yamato blushed, suddenly bent down, and bowed 90 degrees. "Senior Shiro, I'm here as a controlled tool to prevent you from going berserk. In the future, I'll be grateful for your guidance." Uchiha C looked at Aburame Ryoma blankly and couldn't help scratching his head. "Look, how outspoken this kid is. He actually told me so bluntly that he came here just to beat me up." "That's right." Aburame Ryoma patted Uchiha C's shoulder seriously and said solemnly, "Orochimaru has, through some means, brought forth the tailed beast within you. Its power is so immense, so you'll need a caretaker." Aburame Ryoma couldn't help but look at the little kid bowing at a 90-degree angle, a slight embarrassment on his face. "Although, this kid's age, well, so, you must nurture him well, and let him grow up to be able to defeat you." "Hey!" The young Yamato suddenly bent even deeper and shouted in a thunderous voice, "I'll do my best." "Shura-senpai." Uchiha C was momentarily stunned by this sudden development. What the hell was going on? This little brat was sent to beat me, and that's fine. But I actually have to teach this little brat how to beat me? This world was so enchanting that Uchiha C instinctively opened his Sharingan and glanced at the tiny, dog-like zero tail sealed within the 8 diagrams. The young, foolish snake, dazed, raised its head under Uchiha C's gaze, scratching its red fur with its tail. "Chew," it asked, a sound like a mentally retarded person. Uchiha C couldn't help but twitch his lips. "No, you call this such a powerful force? Where has it evolved? Why can't I see it?" Back to reality, Uchiha C was speechless for a while, and under the eager gaze of Aburame Ryoma and the little carrot in front of him, he could only sigh suddenly. He looked at the little brat in front of him who was loyal to him, shook his head, and said with a slight headache, You should follow me for the time being." After a pause, Uchiha C looked up and down at the little carrot, pinching his chin and thinking, "Also, for convenience, from today on, your name will be Yamato." Chapter 202 Mission, Hell Valley Blockade. Sarutobi Hiruzen's questioning. "Well, let's start the mission description. The goal of this mission is to go to Hell Valley and cooperate with the Uchiha clan who are stationed in Hell Valley to guard Hell Valley to prevent the elite sent by the Hidden Cloud Village from releasing the Blood Pond clan." In the Hokage's office, Sarutobi Hiruzen sat behind the Hokage's desk, puffing on his pipe with a solemn expression. To the right of the desk, Nara Shikaku, the newly appointed Hokage's aide, succeeding the older Nara clan leader, was holding a mission brief. He solemnly addressed the 9 elite Konoha ninjas kneeling before his office. "Please note, this mission will likely involve a direct confrontation with the Abi duo of Kumagakure and their elite ninjas, including some genin. So, the mission is S-rank." Upon hearing the name of this duo, the 9 ninjas half knelt on the ground, accepting the mission, looked at each other in dismay. Those who had heard of their formidable opponents exchanged glances. The Abi duo was the strongest force below the rank of Kage since Kumagakure's founding. Though this generation of the Abi duo was still young, their prowess was already renowned throughout the ninja world. Ordinary genin would be instantly defeated before even 10 rounds. And now, the Hokage was sending them to fight these two monstrous beings? "No, I'm fighting a Jimeo." The 3 people in front of the group wore calm expressions, as if they had anticipated this. However, these 3 weren't the team consisting of Uchiha C, Aburame Ryoma, and Yamato. Uchiha Chi and Yamato were silently following Obure and Ryoma, standing behind the partition wall to the right of the Hokage's office, remaining silent. Opposite them, behind the other wall stood the Hokage's direct Anbu. This was the first time Uchiha Chi had known of such a hidden room behind the wall of the Hokage's office. No wonder the third Hokage could summon the Anbu with a wave of his hand in anime. It must be hidden here. From his vantage point, he could see Nara Shikoku continuing inside the Hokage's office, assigning teams and mission objectives. Team 1, Obure Shiguro, you will lead Shirogane Hayama and Mizuno Yuki to form a tactical support team to support the main force. Yes, a dark-haired young man in an airtight protective suit and gloves replied gravely. Team 2, Sarutobi Shinosuke, you will lead Chen Lao and Yuhi Shiku to form the tactical support team to assist the main force. Yes, this time, the answer came from a rather burly-looking man with a dark complexion, wearing a Jounin vest, spiked hair, and two brass knuckle-like weapons called flying swallows slung from his waist. Team 3, Hyuga Hizashi, you will lead Hyuga Kenji and Inuzuka Jaguar to form the perception team to assist the main force. This time, the order was delivered in a deep voice by a man with a taciturn, old-fashioned look and white-eyed eyes, wearing a light green robe over a black combat uniform. With firefighter Namikaze Minato seriously injured and unable to act, Konoha could only deploy the next best candidates, Obure Shiguro, Sarutobi Shinosuke, and Hyuga Hizashi. All three were Konoha's geniuses of Minato's generation. However, as Jiraiya said, compared to Minato, no one else is good enough. Minato Namikaze's brilliance was so dazzling that, at first glance, it seemed as if his generation, with the exception of Minato, had been completely cut off. It wasn't until the emergence of Kakashi's generation that this missing star of the future was filled. But this wasn't the case. Konoha still possessed a considerable number of talented individuals at this time, but as the war progressed, most of these geniuses were lost in the dust of history. The most regrettable of these were the three captains. Uchiha Chi, observing this impressive lineup, nodded slightly in affirmation. It seemed that Konoha's sincerity towards the Uchiha clan was truly profound. Obure Shiguro, the father of Obure Tone, also possesses the Obure clan's nano-poisonous insects and is undoubtedly an elite Jonin. Sarutobi Shinosuke, the deceased brother of Sarutobi Asuma in the original story and the eldest son of the third Hokage, is incredibly powerful, arguably a mature version of Asuma, a true elite Jonin. And Hyuga Hizashi is the current generation's pillar of strength for the Hyuga clan. Besides these three elite Jonin, the other members of this mission also had their own moments of brilliance in the original story. Because Uchiha Chi rewrote the plot, Kumagakure's plan for Jigakudani was thwarted, forcing the clash between Konoha and Kumagakure, which was originally slated to take place in the land of rice, to instead take place in the land of hot water, Jigakudani. And it was a truly epic showdown. Furthermore, thanks to Orochimaru's help, he explained to the higher-ups the importance of Jigakudani to Konoha, leading to a dramatic shift in Konoha's attitude towards Jigakudani. It truly was a huge investment. In the original history, because of the sudden attack by Kumagakure, the death of the great elder Uchiha Setsuna, and the killing of all the clansmen by Miyagi and to escape from Hell Valley, most of the Uchiha clan members in Hell Valley were in great danger. But now, because of Uchiha Chi's actions all along, he actually inadvertently saved the Uchiha clan from a disaster that would have caused a great loss of strength. Such a magical reality made Uchiha Chi scratch his head. To be honest, he really didn't think about saving the Uchiha clan. At the beginning, he just wanted to cheat for insurance. At this moment, the three captains of the hall frowned slightly when they heard Nara Shikoku's arrangement. Sarutobi Shinosuke glanced around at the two people beside him who were a little puzzled, raised his head and asked, Hokage-sama, the team led by the three of us is to assist the main elite to complete the task and block the plan of the Cloud Village to Hell Valley. He paused and asked hesitantly, then where is our main elite? The third generation looked at his son, took a puff of pipe in silence, and after exhaling a puff of smoke, he said, this time the main elite is the powerful ninja who made great contributions in the last battle of Rain Country. In order to avoid information leakage, the details will be told to you after arriving at Hell Valley. Shinosuke Sarutobi Hirozen seemed to want to say something. But he thought about it, shook his head, and said solemnly, you are entrusted with the crucial mission of preventing a war on the scale of the Rain Country War. Remember this. Go and prepare. Depart tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock sharp. The 9 elite ninjas exchanged thoughtful glances before finally rising to bid farewell and leaving the Hokage's office. as silence returned to the Hokage's office. Aburame Ryoma led Uchiha through the partition wall and presented themselves before the third Hokage. This was also the first meeting between Uchiha and the celebrated and infamous third Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen. When they met for the first time, Sarutobi Hiruzen looked at Uchiha, but he did not smile warmly at him like a kind old grandfather as Uchiha had expected. Instead, his face was calm, and his eyes were thoughtful. After thinking for a moment, the ninja hero slowly said, Uchiha, let me ask you a question. The answer to this question will determine whether you go to Hell Valley or I go to Hell Valley myself. Sarutobi Hiruzen paused, narrowed his eyes, stared at Uchiha's eyes, and then asked, everyone desires power, but only those with true wisdom and courage can master true power, like your teacher Orochimaru. Although there is malice and ambition hidden in his eyes, I pretended not to know, because in this war-torn era, he is talented, so I hope that he will inherit everything from me. I can feel that the will I placed on Orochimaru is now being passed on. Orochimaru, just like me, has placed this will on you. Then, if you are the future fifth Hokage of Konoha, the Hokage of the Uchiha clan, can you understand, what is this power called? If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 203, The Prophecy Came True, the Shuriken Shadow Clone Technique. What is power? When Sarutobi Hiruzen painted the picture of becoming the fifth Hokage and posed this question to Uchiha, he remained silent for a moment. His power came so effortlessly, as if as soon as he took a step, the entire world would follow, lifting him up and anointing him king. This was the confidence bestowed upon Uchiha by the steel of his heart. In his eyes, loaded with a hacked version of the ninja world, so-called power was simply something that could be achieved by following the rules. If he had to assign a meaning to this power, Uchiha felt that the words of his adopted ancestor, Uchiha Madara, aptly rang true. Power is not will, but merely the physical phenomenon that makes things happen. He reached this conclusion because, far superior to Uchiha, he possessed untold intelligence from the outset, a supreme perspective. In contrast, after a moment's contemplation, Uchiha decisively raised his head, calmly gazing at the ninja hero, still in his prime and, according to the original novel, capable of instantly defeating Orochimaru 10 years later. He spoke in a deep voice, Third Hokage, in my eyes, strength is merely a means of combat. It is neither noble nor base, but no matter what the situation, I will fight with all my might. Uchiha paused, then raised his head in silence, his gaze resolute. Because this is a mission I cannot escape, the strength he had gained from his battles thus far gave Uchiha the confidence to speak these words now, freeing him from the need to disguise himself, twist his will, or compromise to meet the so-called will of fire. Therefore, he could now fearlessly express his stance to the third Hokage, even if the third Hokage attacked him, tried to stop him, and imprisoned him in the village. He would go to Hell Valley. Not even Jesus could stop him. Is that so? Hearing Uchiha's response, Sarutobi Hiruzen couldn't help but shake his head slightly. After a moment's silence, he slowly spoke, as expected, you're still very young, still a child. He gazed at Uchiha, recalling his achievements so far. This inevitably reminded Sarutobi Hiruzen of his former fellow disciple, Uchiha Kagami. They shared the same innocence, the same willingness to sacrifice everything for their companions. However, Uchiha and Kagami were ultimately different. First, due to their origins, as a ninja from a family rather than a Konoha ninja, Uchiha couldn't earn his full trust. Second, Uchiha, coincidentally, was a disciple of Orochimaru, one of the three ninjas. Ever since Orochimaru broke into the Forbidden Technique library and got everything he wanted under his indulgence, he has gradually become estranged from Konoha. If Orochimaru had not suddenly returned in this war and made great contributions, Sarutobi Hiruzen paused and silently put down the pipe in his hand. He looked at Uchiha, sighed suddenly, and suddenly said earnestly, Uchiha, I can see that there is a desire for power in your eyes, the same pure pursuit of power as Orochimaru. However, such a pursuit will blind your heart and make you ignore important things. You have not experienced unforgettable despair, you have not really lost the things you cherish, and you have not found the answers that can answer your heart, but some things are already destined. and you will find out one day. The power of a ninja will truly be manifested when you want to protect the people you cherish. Hearing this, Uchiha Chi frowned immediately. The Sandame's words were so ambiguous that he couldn't tell whether he wanted him to fight or stay in the village. He glanced around with a sharp gaze, as if at the next moment, with just a command from the Sandame, countless Enbu would leap out and surround him. At this moment, Aburame Ryoma, standing nearby, suddenly asked, "Sir Sandame, what is your decision?" Sarutobi Hiruzen closed his eyes in thought for a moment, then suddenly opened them. "Then, this time, I will hire you as Konoha's heroes to continue protecting this village." As the sun set, Uchiha Chi strolled through the bustling streets of Konoha, a red-covered scroll in his hand. Before leaving the Hokage's office, the third Hokage specifically stopped him and gave him a heartfelt warning: "You only live once. Don't force yourself to choose a path you don't like. Live or die as you please. But no matter which path you choose, never forget to protect those you cherish." He then presented him with a scroll. The scroll contained the Shuriken Shadow Clone Technique, a highly advanced A-rank ninjutsu developed by the third Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen. This technique can transform a single shuriken into thousands, forming a net-like formation. Because the resulting shuriken are solid, they are difficult for the enemy to evade, making it a perfect encirclement. For the Uchiha, known for their prowess in shuriken techniques, the value of this technique is self-evident. Furthermore, once he understands the principles behind it, it seems Uchiha Chi may even be able to derive a rudimentary form of the forbidden multiple shadow clone technique from this technique, a technique that appears to be based on the multiple shadow clone technique. The multiple shadow clone jutsu, a forbidden technique developed by the second Hokage, Senju Tobirama, consumes excessive chakra. Those without a sufficient chakra reserve would injure themselves or even endanger their lives. However, the third Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, developed this technique based on it, bypassing the restrictions of the forbidden technique and enabling ninja tools that are painless. This offset the cost, making it a high-level ninjutsu that even ordinary ninjas could master and utilize in combat, truly worthy of the title of ninjutsu professor. Whether it was a gift from the third Hokage as his master or a reward for a previous mission, Uchiha Chi immediately smiled with a sense of having gotten something for free. After obtaining Kokuzu's secret technique, Earth Grudge Suturing, which allowed him to obtain ninja tool thread for free, he now possessed the Shuriken Shadow Clone Jutsu. This significantly reduced even the cost of ninja tools. With the increasing intensity of combat, the Uchiha Ryu Silk Manipulation Shuriken Jutsu, which was gradually being phased out, seemed to have new possibilities after acquiring this technique. As the sun set, the light from the horizon limned, slanting down onto the street, casting long shadows on the utility poles. A flock of sparrows soared, gradually illuminating the roadside with beams of warm white light. Uchiha Chi was still daydreaming about the application of the Shuriken Shadow Clone Technique and the Uchiha-style Silk Shuriken Technique. Such fancy tricks were something no Uchiha could resist. Suddenly, a small hand tugged at the hem of his short-collared kimono. "Senior, please wait." It was his newest recruit, Yamato. After instructing them on tomorrow's meeting time, Aburame Ryoma had handed the boy to Uchiha Chi. Since then, the child has been hanging around him like a shadowy figure. "Huh?" Uchiha Chi paused, regaining consciousness. He realized that he had unknowingly passed through the Tea Street in front of the Hokage building and the Yamanaka clan's flower shop, heading south towards Konoha, and finally arrived at Ichiriko Ramen. Uchiha Chi suddenly realized he had been hanging around all day, and his boss Aburame Ryoma didn't provide meals. He didn't mind, but Yamato, who was only 7 years old and was still growing, must be very hungry. He was too embarrassed to speak up, so he could only use this euphemistic way. But after Uchiha Chi touched his pocket, his expression suddenly changed. The clothes on his body were not his original ones. He didn't have a penny at the moment, and this was not the Uchiha clan's land, so he couldn't go to the old lady Jing to show his face. Uchiha Chi suddenly looked embarrassed and coughed twice. "Well, Yamato, a ninja is a creature that can endure everything. Be patient, Elbow. Come home with me, and I'll make you 2 fried eggs. In addition, as a senior, I have to advise you that the fly restaurants outside are unhygienic." "Senior, what are you talking about?" Yamato covered his face with his hands and sighed helplessly. He turned around with Uchiha Chi, raised his little hand, and pointed at Ichiriko Ramen House. "Someone is calling you over there." Uchiha Chi was startled, then he raised his head suddenly, and saw Kushina sitting on a high stool at the location of Ichiriko ramen restaurant. She turned around and waved at him. She put her hands into trumpet shape, put them to her mouth, and called out to him loudly, "Oh, yes, it's you, Uchiha's bastard brat, come here quickly." Chapter 204 Kushina's Scroll, the crisis is emerging. At dusk, shadows flickered in the setting sun. Uchiha Chi sat on a high stool in front of Ichiriko ramen, sweating profusely, feeling the pressure of the gazes. "Eat, why don't you eat? This chicken soup is delicious." Kushina smiled, picking at the Naruto-maki in her bowl with her chopsticks, and looked at Uchiha Chi tenderly. To Uchiha Chi's right, Yamato in his cub form stared at him with resentment. His stomach rumbled with hunger, but disciplined by his training in the route, he could only stare at Uchiha Chi. The message was clear: eat, why don't you eat? How could he eat if his superior didn't start? Adding to Uchiha Chi's pressure was the narrow-eyed young man behind the noodle stand. No one knew if this young man, the conceptual god known as Otsutsuki Ichiraku, would reveal a pair of Mangekyo Sharingans, the Rinnegan, or even the 9 Magneto Samsara eyes when he opened his eyes. At that moment, he was gazing intently at Uchiha Chi, his gaze brimming with fighting spirit. Raising his hand, he poured another spoonful of delicious chicken broth into Uchiha Chi's bowl. "Come on, sir, eat. Why aren't you eating yet? Is the cooking at this shabby place not to your liking?" His tone held a hint of resentment. As he gazed at the incredibly delicious, vibrant, and fragrant Ichiriko ramen before him, Uchiha Chi felt sweat dripping down his forehead. Oh no! Otsutsuki Ichiraku had heard this and called his Ichiriko ramen a shabby place. He was pissed. He was definitely pissed. Could he have put a grenade in his ramen? Under the eager gazes of the crowd, Uchiha Chi could only tremble as he lifted his chopsticks and picked up the ramen. Swish the steaming, chewy, and refreshing ramen, slurped with the incredibly delicious broth, slurped into his mouth and into his stomach. A warmth instantly spread throughout his body, and Uchiha Chi, who hadn't had a proper meal in days, opened his eyes slightly. Delicious, the feeling of enjoying a bowl of Ichiriko ramen in Konoha reminded him of the excitement of savoring the most authentic Lanzhou ramen in Lanzhou, a bowl filled with a cow. Seeing Uchiha Chi pick up his chopsticks, Yamato, who was already starving, could no longer hold back. He immediately clasped his chopsticks in his hands and politely said, "I'm starting." Seeing the two men slurping their food, looking like starving ghosts, the noodle stand behind the counter suddenly broke into a triumphant smile of relief. Meanwhile, Kushina watched the two men eat and smiled knowingly. "By the way, see?" she suddenly asked. "Mikado told me the Fugaku is helping you collect sealing techniques. Are you studying them?" This morning, she came to me and asked if I could sell some Uzumaki clan techniques to the Uchiha clan. Hearing this, Uchiha Chi was stunned. Speaking of sealing techniques, he did have a manual on the inner four-symbol sealing technique that needed to be mastered. He hadn't expected Fugaku to know about it and already be arranging for it. However, aside from the Uzumaki clan techniques that had been integrated into Konoha, the remaining sealing techniques available in Konoha were, to be honest, rather unremarkable. Most were basic techniques like the 1-series light array and the 3-part seal. For mastering the inner four-symbol sealing technique, these basic techniques were of little use and could only serve as a starting point. In the end, Fugaku had only Kushina to turn to. He hadn't expected that even the pregnant Mikado would come forward for him. Thinking of this, Uchiha Chi immediately looked at Kushina and nodded. "If you could sell me some basic knowledge about the four-symbol seal, that would be a huge help." Kushina shook her head and whispered, "Theoretically, that's not possible. The four-symbol seal, a top-level sealing technique capable of sealing the tailed beasts, is classified." However, she immediately pulled a scroll from the bag tied to her trouser leg and pushed it towards Uchiha Chi. Kushina blinked at him. "You didn't see it, and you don't know about it. If Old Man Sandame asks, just say you found this scroll. Hey, I'm going to visit Minato." With that, Kushina stood up, waved to Uchiha Chi, gave a playful smile, and turned, her hands behind her back, leaving the Ichiriko ramen stand. Kana soon, her figure disappeared into the swaying dusk. Uchiha Chi stared blankly at the scroll before him, his heart warming. Until he saw where Kushina had left, revealing the 10-high stack of bowls. Suddenly, his expression changed drastically. "No, big sister, you said it's gonna, so it's gonna. Did you pay for the noodles? Damn. Not only did this guy call Otsutsuki Ichiraku a jerk in front of him, he didn't even have the money to pay, and he even tried to eat for free." Uchiha Chi, Sweat dripping down his spine once more, stiffly raised his head. He saw the young man behind the platform, his narrowed eyes constantly glancing at him dangerously. He asked softly, "Guest, you're not looking to freeload, are you?" Uchiha Chi blinked, his gaze shifting to Yamato, who was grunting at his food in his cub form. He chuckled dryly and asked guiltily, "Do you accept child labor as debt repayment?" Yamato suddenly felt a chill run through his body. He looked up thoughtfully, tilting his head to look at Uchiha Chi, and they stared at each other. Meanwhile, in the Kingdom of Soup. In the rebuilt capital of Tangayan City, south of the city, in Black Hand Alley, at the underground black market, a white-haired old woman, her eyes gleaming with murderous intent, walked indifferently into the alley, past the ninja tool shop at the entrance to the underground black market, and headed towards a funeral parlor, a branch of the Kingdom of Soup's underground money exchange. She stepped directly over the shop owner who was sitting on a wooden plank on the ground, half dead, with his head drooping, making origami out of white paper, and walked through the main hall to a small courtyard with drafts all around and where coffins were hung out to dry in the shade. After passing 4 rows of coffins, at the 4th coffin in the 4th row, the old woman finally stopped. She took a deep breath, raised her hand with a grim expression, and knocked on the coffin lid 4 times. The next moment, a bald man in white pushed open the coffin lid, stood up from the coffin, and looked at her dimly. "Dear guest, what brings you here? Kidnapping, blackmail, bounty, intelligence, assassination. Even if you want to become a noble of this country tomorrow, as long as you can afford the price, we bounty hunters will serve you wholeheartedly." The old woman closed her eyes, exhaled deeply, and shouted in a muffled voice, I want to kill someone." The bald man smiled slightly. "No problem, who do you want to reward?" The old woman's face suddenly became ferocious, and a murderous intent that lasted all night suddenly burst out in her eyes. "Konoha genin, codenamed Shiro, Uchiha Chi, I want to disclose all the information about this person, and the reward is 60 million taels." Chapter 205, The Murderous Intention from the Other Side. The Double Torture of Art and Money. The night was silent, dark clouds looming. Birds fluttered up, trailing scattered shadows as they carried information in all directions. A closer look revealed the special ninjas sprinting through the darkness, wearing low-brimmed hats with numbers and binoculars. Male ninjas, in the attic of a ninja tool shop at the entrance to the underground black market in Tangayan City, Uchiha Chi, who was browsing through the intel he had gathered recently, suddenly frowned and glanced down. Did someone come out of the underground money exchange? Who's behind this massive operation? The male ninjas were a neutral group of ninjas who served daimyos, nobles, ninja villages, and various underground forces, including the underground money exchange. When a large bounty was offered, these ninjas would be hired by the underground money exchange to promptly disseminate information to every corner of the ninja world, allowing bounty hunters roaming the world to take on the task. With this thought, Chiichiro could no longer sit still. He immediately stood up and went downstairs, summoning his men to find out what had happened. Soon, the information, which had been deliberately concealed by the exchange, was collected and handed to Uchiha Chiichiro. When Chiichiro saw the information on it, his face suddenly changed drastically. All information on Uchiha Chi has been made public for free, all the techniques, corresponding countermeasures, and his next whereabouts, and there's also this huge reward. Not good. Quickly inform the clan and prevent C from leaving the village. The next morning, using 3 methods of communication, namely, male ninja, summoning beasts, and carrier pigeons, a massive reward worth 60 million was posted at the top of the bounty list of underground exchange offices across the ninja world. Except for Konoha, where the communication was deliberately delayed, in just one night, countless bounty-bearing ninja knew the name, Uchiha Chi. A 12-year-old, a Konoha genin, possesses super-fast regeneration, powerful fire escape techniques, taijutsu, and shuriken abilities. Under the codename Shiro, he participated in the Rain Country campaign, using a yellow flash to slay Tsunagaku high-ranking figure, Epizo. The bounty. 60 million ryo. The point of this bounty isn't the money, but the information it reveals. A 12-year-old genin, a genius yet to mature, and the possibility that he possesses a unique artificial tailed beast within him, a unique artifact in the ninja world. This information immediately attracted considerable attention. After all, elite genin like future Chiriku and Asuma are only worth around 30 million. And this 12-year-old, presumably no more powerful, is worth 60 million. And that doesn't even factor in the value of the Uchiha clan's Sharingan, or the tail beast, within him. The news shook the ninja world. Rival ninja villages couldn't sit idly by while such a prodigy flourished. Greedy bounty hunters, seeing the enormous bounty offered and the disparity in rank between them and the mere genin, were tempted to act. Conspirators and ambitious individuals, seized upon this unique intelligence, were intrigued. And then, in the land of wind, beneath the swirling sand and swirling clouds, a handsome young man with red hair and a high-collared black robe emerged from a gold exchange station beneath the swirling sand. This man, the man who had sparked the Third Shinobi World War, assassinated the Third Hokage and created him into a human puppet, and possessed the Red Secret Technique, 100 machine manipulation, a top-tier puppeteer, Scorpion of the Red Sand. His hands were still stained with warm blood, and judging by his stance as he emerged from the underground gold exchange station, it seemed that Scorpion, having defected from the Tsunagakure, sometimes had to perform the dirty work necessary to earn the exorbitant fees for maintaining his puppets in pursuit of his enduring art. At that moment, Scorpion was clutching a thick leather booklet, carefully perusing the rather excessively detailed information on Uchiha Chi. Super speed regeneration, piercing vital points without dying, such abilities. And this description of the beautiful and dazzling fire-release ninjutsu, his eyes lit up as he finished reading the contents, his lips curling up. Art is about enduring beauty, enduring through the ages. Eternal beauty is art. If he were made into a human puppet, with his self-repairing and regenerative properties, all we need to do is remove his internal organs, peel off his skin, clean the blood, embalm him, and then add various devices. This might be my most perfect collection. Uchiha Chi. Meanwhile, in the land of grass, on the route of the Iwagakure village's retreat from the Kurigakure battlefield, a long-planned assassination was coming to an end. Ignoring the scattered limbs on the ground and stepping over a pool of steaming blood, Kokuzu reached out and removed the still-beating heart from the chest of an Iwagakure expert, skilled in earth escape. The next moment, countless earth-wrath tentacles swarmed from his palm, wrapping around it and devouring it, transforming it, and using it for his own purposes. Kokuzu let out a sigh of relief. Finding a suitable heart was difficult. After losing his earth-attributed heart in a battle with that poor brat in the land of hot water, Kokuzu traveled to several countries to replace it with a suitable heart to use his earth escape technique, Earth Spear, in its strongest form. Finally, he found the right person in Iwagakure. What a nuisance. You're keeping me from making money. Kokuzu straightened his collar, waved off the corpse, and shook his head with a cold snort. After regaining his composure, he began to consider what missions he should take on to earn the bounty. Just then, a bird's cry echoed from the sky, and a scroll descended from midair towards Kokuzu. Kokuzu raised an eyebrow, took the scroll, and unfolded it. A moment later, a flash of surprise crossed his face. The scroll contained information about Uchiha Chi, the poor brat he had toyed with and ultimately driven to death. This brat's not dead yet, he's mastered a new technique, immortality? And this? Isn't this describing my secret technique, Earth Grudge? How did he learn that from me? And the bounty has been raised to 60 million ryo. Kokuzu was bewildered, staring at the scroll in his hands, lost in thought. He was certain that Uchiha Chi's initial use of the forbidden technique was indeed fatal. The mighty flowing flame sword, once swung, would leave no survivors, incinerating the caster to charcoal. To avoid unnecessary losses, Kokuzu had a premonition that he could shatter Uchiha Chi's forbidden technique with Earth's wrath, final shot and secure victory. But he didn't need to risk his life against a madman, did he? He hadn't anticipated that his careless action would allow the impoverished brat to escape, and even steal his secret technique from him. Tisk, Kokuzu frowned, looking at the huge sum marked at the end of the scroll and the special invitation from the gold exchange. His eyes narrowed, his gaze shifting slightly as he mentally calculated the price. Soon, his brows relaxed, his gaze returning to detached indifference. It's just another tiring trip. The judgment in hell is also based on money, just the way I want it. With that, Kokuzu turned and rushed towards the land of hot water. In his deep green eyes, a murderous intent, one Kokuzu himself hadn't even noticed, blazed fiercely. And so, before Uchiha Chi could even begin to understand, the twin tortures of art and money were quietly approaching. Chapter 206, Set off and return to the battlefield. Centrifugal force. How can you go out without money? Here, take it. It was nearly 8 o'clock in the morning. At the gates of Konoha, Uchiha Mikado, heavily pregnant, helped Uchiha Chi fasten the lacing of his vest. Then, she quietly slipped a bankbook over his shoulders, offering the young man she had just met a tender smile, like an older sister. "You can't do that, you can't do that." Uchiha Chi's face was slightly embarrassed, and for a moment, he felt as if he'd been given a red envelope by an elder during Chinese New Year. He didn't even bother to check the amount on the blue bankbook. He simply raised his hand and began to perform Tai Chi moves. Mikado, though pregnant, was, after all, an elite female jounin who had participated in the Great Ninja War. The two sides engaged in a back-and-forth exchange of blows, countering each other's moves. "Since it's Mikado's, take it," Uchiha Fugaku said, his arms folded at the gates of Konoha, shaking his head and laughing. He surveyed the neatly dressed Uchiha Chi with a hint of displeasure. "Everything about this Enbu uniform is good, and Uchiha Chi looks quite decent in it. The only thing is, why can't there be a big Uchiha clan emblem printed on the vest? Oh, and these." Fugaku raised his head and looked at the sky. Realizing that the time was almost up, he took out a scroll and a small medicine bag from his arms. He lowered his head and said to Uchiha Chi solemnly, "The training plan that was originally set for you to complete has been delayed because of this incident, but training is like rowing against a current, and you can't slack off for a moment. I know you have mastered the power of the tailed beasts, but don't underestimate our clan's ninjutsu that is compatible with the fire style, chakra mode." Fugaku frowned slightly and reminded, "Those powers are ultimately just external forces. The true power of our clan is hidden in these eyes, including this awakening pill sent by Orochimaru. Don't rely too much on their power. The real strong must start from himself." As he said, Fugaku handed the swordsmanship scroll recording the Uchiha style, ho dancing and the medicine bag containing the awakening pill to Uchiha Chi. Hearing this, Uchiha Chi nodded. A battle between ninjas is a battle of intelligence. No matter how many tactics are employed, once they are seen through, they will always find a way to counter them. Unless one reaches the level of Uchiha Madara and Senju Hashirama, ignoring the savior's cheating tactics, they can crush all with pure strength. Uchiha Chi is well aware of his system. It's a miracle created by the interweaving of multiple forbidden techniques. But if even one link is disrupted, the entire system could collapse. His enemies, however, have never noticed this. So far, only Orochimaru has exploited this and developed countermeasures. "I understand. I will practice diligently," taking the scroll and medicine sachet, and then placing the passbook in the back pocket of his Enbu vest, Uchiha Chi was about to offer a few more pleasantries. After all, they were giving him money, medicine, and martial arts manuals. He would feel guilty if he didn't say anything nice. At that moment, the slender Yamato trotted from the village entrance, waving his arms and shouting, "Senior, time to set off." Fugaku, noticing Uchiha Chi's awkwardness, nodded and instructed, "Go to Hell Valley, complete the rest of your training in Hell Valley. The Great Elder is waiting for you there." Stepping out of Konoha village again, feeling the early spring breeze, Uchiha Chi surveyed his surroundings. 4 elite teams, representing Konoha's top forces, were already gearing up for their mission. Because Uchiha Chi's role as the core elite for this mission hadn't been announced, Sarutobi Shinizuke was temporarily in command. Though young, the son of the Hokage possessed immense experience and a gentle demeanor, a stark contrast to the future rebellious Asuma. "Everyone, the goal of this mission is to reach Hell Valley and provide support to the garrison. The route map has been distributed to everyone. The main elite troops seem to have already set out, so we must hurry. We will take 2 days to cross the vast hilly terrain from the land of fire to the land of hot water, entering the land of hot water from the side in the direction of the land of fields. This is the closest route to Hell Valley, due to the current complex situation in the land of hot water. After crossing it, we will not allow any rest breaks and head straight for Hell Valley. The team will move in a goose formation." Sarutobi Shinizuke laid out the arrangements before the group. His reasoning was reasonable, so no one objected. Standing beside Uchiha Chi were Aburane Ryoma and Yamato. Sarutobi Shinizuke had positioned the 3 of them on the upper left flank, taking into account the 2 young ninjas in the team and Aburane Ryoma's ability to provide long-range support with parasitic insects. Soon, the group set off at a steady and swift pace. Uchiha Chi had already traversed this route once, so he was familiar with it. Even with the young Yamato, he could keep up with the group's pace. At this point, with the exception of Tsunagakure, which had been driven back to the land of rain, the other major nations had not yet declared war on Konoha, so the journey was relatively safe. After each significant distance, the group would stop to resupply and rest. During these times, Uchiha Chi would pull out his scrolls and look through the techniques he seemed able to master quickly. It was like sharpening a sword before a battle. Even if he didn't hurry, he would finish them. By this time, he had a vast inventory of scrolls, and he urgently needed to process them and transform them into abilities he could master. However, the only ones he could understand were the Shuriken Shadow Clone technique and the swordsmanship scroll he had just received from Uchiha Fugaku. Just as the group was about to reach the land of hot water, after 2 days and 1 night of travel, and resting for the final night, an unexpected visitor suddenly arrived. At that moment, a bonfire rose in the night breeze, its flame swirls. Uchiha Chi, holding a string of flatbreads in one hand, roasted them over the bonfire, while with the other hand, he practiced swordsmanship, his Sharingan illuminated, silently observing the rising flames, lost in thought. Uchiha Ryu, Sun Halo Dance, a sword technique based on the fire-style chakra mode, incorporates techniques for attaching fire-style chakra and the eye techniques of the Sharingan. It is a masterful sword technique that allows the user to leap and dance like walking on flames, lurking deadly intent amidst the blaze and illusions. After using the Sharingan to deconstruct the movements of this sword technique frame by frame, Uchiha Chi quickly encountered a problem. The attachment of fire style and the insertion of illusions into swordsmanship were no problem for Uchiha Chi, who already had experience in this area. The crux of the matter lay in the sheer uncanny nature of the movements. The scroll instructed the user to swing their sword and simultaneously leap, folding and folding mid-air, soaring into the sky like a flaming bird. The description was incredibly bizarre. Translated, it meant mastering double and triple jumps in mid-air. It was as difficult as ascending to heaven by stepping on your left foot, completely defying the laws of physics. How was anyone supposed to learn this? Uchiha Chi delved into it for a long time, but couldn't find a clear solution. He was extremely distressed, racking his brains to figure out how this thing did it, but at that moment, a slightly cynical old voice suddenly sounded in Uchiha Chi's ears. "I've been watching you for 2 days, how can you not understand such a simple principle?" Uchiha Chi looked up in surprise and saw a small old man wearing sunglasses, a yellow vest, and brown-green crop pants walking towards the dim light of the campfire. The old man's eyebrows were knitted together, and his face looked like he was disappointed in his son. He stared at Uchiha Chi gloomily. "Kid, listen to master this move. What you lack is centrifugal force, do you understand?" Centrifugal force. Chapter 207 Konoha Dragon God. Centrifugal force. Centrifugal force. Uchiha Chi's mouth twitched at the words of the approaching old man. He knew what centrifugal force was, of course. It was a virtual force, a manifestation of inertia, causing a rotating object to move away from its center of rotation. The core principle of the expanding Rasengan, unlike ordinary Rasengan, was to free the raging chakra from this centrifugal force, causing it to expand uncontrollably and explode. But, could this thing also be used in physical techniques? Such a fantastical statement instantly shattered Uchiha Chi's already limited scientific understanding. But come to think of it, he should have adapted to this world of ninjas long ago, a world where all kinds of seemingly scientific things are actually just like the power of my thinking, a world full of monsters crawling all over the place. At this time, a little old man wearing a yellow vest and sunglasses, just like a Burain Ryoma, even in such a deep night, poked his head over and looked at Uchiha Chi with a look as if a blind man was looking at a blind man. "What? You don't understand, too stupid, so stupid, why would the village let a young man like you be the main lead of this operation?" Hearing this, Uchiha Chi raised his head in surprise. The information about him being the main elite should be confidential, and the third generation did not reveal this before departure. He took in the man's attire and pondered for a moment before suddenly remembering that this old man was the man known in Konoha during this period as Konoha's strongest taijutsu ninja, possessing the unique skill Konoha Dragon God. He was a taijutsu master capable of overcoming the combined might of Kai and Lee in the Fourth Shinobi World War. His real name was Chen Baojin, yes, that Chinese-sounding name, even vaguely similar to the name of a certain descendant of the pine cone phlegm lightning whip. At this moment, old Chen raised his thick eyebrows and curled his lips. "Why are you looking at me like that? Do you think everyone here is blind?" Uchiha Chi shook his head repeatedly, but after his gaze fell on the man's sunglasses, he couldn't help but wonder, "Master, you're wearing sunglasses so late at night. It's hard not to suspect you're not blind." Bang! Just as he was thinking this, The old man's hands behind his back struck him with a chestnut. Your squad's position in the goose-shaped formation is where the general is. You're protected by archers and foot soldiers. You can attack or defend. You have the deputy commander of the route as your guard, and the other brat is also very respectful to you. Such a strange squad. Sarutobi Shinisuke saw through your true nature long ago, so he made this arrangement. It's a pity that you, the general, didn't realize it. You should be the Shura who defeated that old man Ebizo in the last battle in Rain Country. Old Chen glanced at Uchiha with disdain, shook his head, and sat down on the stone slab by the campfire with his hands behind his back. He picked up a branch from the ground and roughly drew the entire goose-shaped formation and the arrangements of the 4 elite squads on the ground, pointing out, however, Sarutobi Shinisuke's skills are still not enough. This approach is still inferior. The so-called military strategy emphasizes the combination of the real and the fake. I can see the center of the formation, and the enemy can naturally see it too. You should actually be assigned to the cavalry position. Uchiha scratched his head, confused, and could only look up at the old man with admiration. I don't understand anything you're saying, but I still think it's awesome JPG. As expected of Kung Fu Chinese, Elder Chen twitched his lips at Uchiha's face of clear foolishness, realizing that he had been flirting with a blind man. Mr. Chen? Uchiha had come back to his senses and asked about his earlier question. I'm wondering, about centrifugal force. How do I apply it to taijutsu? He stared at the old man before him. Once a ninja's taijutsu reaches a certain level, it becomes abstract. While Li's drunken fist in the anime was still manageable, the abilities that followed were completely beyond his comprehension. Think Li's range, Might Guy's night guy, Might Guy's evening elephant. Even the 7 days breathing technique of Shira, the second-generation champion of Sand Village, who went straight to Super Saiyan. Here's a picture for you to see. When beating up Sand Village champion Ebizo, Uchiha tried to learn some of the moves on the spot, but the resulting Uchiha style was honestly a bit too boxing-esque. It wasn't ninja at all. Uchiha was deeply curious about this unique taijutsu. And the thought that the Uchiha clan possessed such a sophisticated, rather, powerful and impressive, physical technique made Uchiha's heart ache like a kitten, eager to learn it. And the first step was figuring out how to double jump, triple jump, or even multi-jump to soar into the sky. Centrifugal force, well, it's simple enough. Old Chen dropped his stick and stomped his foot across the formation diagram he'd drawn on the ground. After a moment's pause, he said, ninja physical techniques also utilize chakra. Combining chakra with centrifugal force allows one to reach a state of inner self, allowing imagination to flow freely. A physical practitioner's consciousness is like a mirror. It possesses nothing, yet encompasses everything. It accepts everything, yet holds nothing back. It is inactive and desireless, yet always ready to accept, using the unconscious to control its entire consciousness. Specifically, how to do this is through constant training, allowing you to relax your mind to the greatest extent possible, becoming more free. This centrifugal freedom will then lead to freedom in your physical techniques. Old Chen's face was serious as he pointed out, this is centrifugal force. Do you understand? Uchiha's eyes widened slightly, staring at the old man in front of him in shock. So the centrifugal force you're talking about isn't the centrifugal force I imagined, but centrifugal force? No, I'm learning about trade. Uchiha blinked and said frankly, Teacher Chen, I don't understand. Old Chen frowned, looking at Uchiha with a look of this kid is stupid. After thinking for a moment, he sighed, you're too stupid. I can't help it. I'll just show you how to do it with examples. With that, Old Chen stood up, walked to a solitary beech tree, and swung his leg, unleashing a fierce gust of wind. Instantly, the debris on the wasteland beside the campfire was swept away, and leaves fell all over the sky. Old Chen stood under the tree with his hands behind his back, looked back, and asked calmly, do you know Konoha whirlwind? Uchiha looked at Old Chen with sparkling eyes and nodded like a chicken pecking at rice. Konoha whirlwind. Translated, that means whirlwind kick. Uchiha knows it. Elder Chen nodded, then unleashed another slow-motion whip kick. This time, he spun mid-air and unleashed 2 more. The explosive force of his kicks shook the trees in front of him. Then, turning back, he asked calmly, do you understand the Konoha cyclone? Uchiha nodded again. As a familiar move used by Emperor Kai and Xiaoli, he had certainly seen it before. Then, Elder Chen narrowed his eyes and said solemnly, then here comes the crucial part. Konoha, sudden wind. With those words, Elder Chen leaped high, his speed suddenly increasing by more than tenfold. The gusts of wind whipped Uchiha Chi's hair up. Elder Chen's form was reflected in his crimson Sharingan, his movements captured frame by frame. But the speed was so great that Uchiha Chi could only see an afterimage. Old Chen spun in midair, performing a two-part hollow spinning kick. Then, using the inertia and centrifugal force of his spin, he unleashed a third, straight, spinning kick into the tree. Bang! The tree swayed fiercely. But that wasn't the end. Mid-air, Old Chen's voice darkened, and he shouted, "Watch this, boy, that's perfect use of centrifugal force." Using the inertia from his third spinning kick, Old Chen spun again and unleashed a fierce kick. His body, following the direction of his rotation, suddenly began to spin like a whirling top. The scattered leaves on the ground and in the air were instantly swept up by the whirling wind. "This is the dragon god of Konoha?" Faster and faster, Old Chen spun against the wind, until even the Sharingan could no longer discern his form. All that could be seen was a tornado, borne by his spinning body, gradually transforming into the shape of a divine dragon, roaring to the heavens. Ang! Violent chakra fluctuations and powerful winds thundered into the sky. The dragon bared its fangs and claws in the sky, swaying its body. It seemed graceful, but in reality, every inch of its body was composed of wind blades that would instantly rip a human body to shreds. Uchiha Chi's eyes widened as he watched, step by step, ordinary moves transform into miraculous physical techniques before his eyes. At that moment, it was as if a huge bell exploded in his ears. At that moment, it was as if a bright door opened before him. Pushing open this door, he arrived, the realm that can only be achieved by reaching the pinnacle of pure physical skills. Uchiha Chi had originally thought that Elder Chen was talking about centrifugal force, but he never expected that Elder Chen was referring to both centrifugal force and centrifugal force. Comparing this with a vague description in Uchiha style, Halo Dance, Uchiha Chi suddenly understood. Chapter 208, A Man Who Wishes to Die, learns swordsmanship for the first time. Shocking changes. Under the night sky, a divine azure dragon soared high into the sky, circling mid-air, revealing its immense size and terrifying power. This was the freedom born from the heart, the rage born from the heart. Hatred wrapped in relief, as unbridled as a final dance. A mighty wind swept across the makeshift campsite of Konoha's elite ninjas. Woof, a large, yellow-haired dog trembled slightly at the overwhelming force. Inuzuka, standing nearby, quickly stepped forward to pet the dog's head and comfort it. He looked up with a hint of discontent at the commotion not far away, complaining to the team leader, "Why is Master Chen teaching us his impossible taijutsu again?" Sarutobi Shinosuke, observing the nearby commotion, shook his head, sighed, and offered soothing words, "Before you leave the land of fire, follow Master Chen. He has no family, and his only disciple was recently targeted and brutally murdered while on a mission. At his age, he shouldn't have to leave the village for such a dangerous mission." Sarutobi Shinosuke gazed at the dragon soaring freely in the sky, his eyes tinged with regret. This time, Master Chen is probably going into battle with the intention of dying. Perhaps he's unwilling to give up, wanting to prove something, or perhaps he wants to find a successor to his technique before he dies. Hearing this, everyone sitting around the campfire fell silent. Inuzuka also sighed. "I understand the logic, but how could anyone other than Old Chen learn that kind of taijutsu? Only a disciple like him, who doesn't know ninjutsu or jinjutsu and relies solely on taijutsu to become a ninja, would be foolish enough to believe such a thing. What about mental strength, free will, and centrifugal force? They're all so mysterious. After all, this kind of taijutsu that can be stumbled upon, that allows one to soar through the air, is something no one can possibly learn elsewhere." Old Chen slowly descended from the air and let out a long sigh. As if using the Konoha Dragon God move had brought back some unpleasant memories, his frail figure looked a little bleak. The scene, now a shambles, resembled a parking lot ravaged by a tornado. Old Chen put his hands behind his back, cheered up a little, and asked Uchiha Chi, who was in front of him with a look of confusion in a seemingly nonchalant manner, "How about it, kid? Do you understand what centrifugal force is?" Old Chen coughed twice, and he was sure that the stupid kid in front of him would not be able to learn such a difficult skill. After all, he had been observing for 2 days. This stupid Uchiha kid held the Uchiha family's sword scroll and read it again and again, but he didn't see anything. Obviously, this kid's aptitude is the same as that of his stupid disciple, very dull. His thoughts raced, making him ignore Uchiha Chi's answer, and he spoke with some comfort. It doesn't matter if you don't understand. After all, my physical skills are not ordinary people's. Uchiha Chi was stunned and interrupted immediately. Teacher Chen, I understand, huh? Hearing this, old Chen's brows couldn't help but twitch wildly. His face immediately changed, staring at Uchiha Chi, and asked in surprise, wait, what did you just say? What do you understand? Skills. Uchiha Chi nodded excitedly, opened his hands, gestured and explained, the skills of physical skills. I understand, the combination of physical skills and chakra bursts. Rotating limbs to form centrifugal force, plus a strong body that can withstand high pressure, and the speed of the whole process, needs to reach a speed that exceeds the limit of the human body. This is similar to my sword technique, the only difference being that you use leg techniques, while I spin and leap with my sword. After observing the meticulous disassembly of the Konoha dragon god, Uchiha Chi's eyes flashed with subtitles. After observing Chen Baojan's Konoha dragon god, you have gained some insights. You have mastered a high-level taijutsu technique. A beginner? This subtitle confirmed to Uchiha Chi that he could replicate such a technique. Hearing Uchiha Chi's convincing description, old Chen's face froze, and he was slightly stunned. You understand now? That's impossible. Even a seasoned ninja with years of experience in taijutsu could only emulate the form of his technique, at best completing the third stage of the Konoha storm. Is this kid just bragging? Thinking of this, old Chen couldn't help but glare behind his sunglasses, then hesitantly asked, then, you use one, let me see. Uchiha Chi nodded. He only needed this last piece of the puzzle to master Uchiha style, sunlight dance. It just so happened that he wanted to try to master this sword technique that could be paired with fire style, chakra mode. The complete Uchiha style, sunlight dance was considered a secret, S-level forbidden sword technique, the ultimate in swordplay. The A-level fire style, chakra mode merely served as the core kinetic energy that powered it. Even so, Uchiha Chi had leveraged this A-level forbidden technique to develop a variety of ninjutsu, including the shooting greatsword, flame wind dragon dance and the ninjutsu, hurricane water whirlpool sword. These ninjutsu, however, were more sword-based ninjutsu, drawing on the Kusanagi sword, than sword techniques. Currently, he lacked a ninjutsu capable of engaging in intense combat within a small space, a ninjutsu capable of competing with true masters. And so, under old Chen's slightly suspicious gaze, amidst the suddenly silent forest, beneath a gloomy night sky reminiscent of a torrential downpour, illuminated by the slowly dancing, blazing flames, Uchiha Chi slowly drew the Kusanagi sword from his waist. He closed his eyes slightly, recalling old Chen's sudden transformation from Konoha's sudden gust of wind to his sudden mastery of the Konoha dragon god. His mind cleared, his spirit gradually becoming clearer. The seemingly unconventional, almost impossibly difficult, sword moves from the scroll silently flowed through his mind. Through the interplay of these physical techniques, they gradually formed a sword technique that soared through the sky, clouds, and the radiant sun. The next moment, Uchiha Chi's eyes suddenly opened, revealing a pair of crimson, double Magatama Sharingans. Within his eyes, a dazzling, blazing flame quietly leaped and rose. But at that moment, the night wind suddenly surged with a howling sound, a faint sob. Snap, clack. A gentle sound of footsteps gradually echoed through the forested area, where the hot springs met the fire. The clouds parted slightly, and in the moonlight, a tall man, wearing a black robe and a black face mask, a black veil, and a pair of murderous green eyes, slowly approached. Silently, 3 bold red captions suddenly appeared before his eyes. Attention. Kakuzu, the S-rank renegade ninja from Takigakure, seeking a bounty on your head, has arrived. Attention. Lamy, an elite Jounin from the Hidden Cloud Village, who harbors deep hatred for you, is en route to the battlefield. Attention. Killer B, the 8-Tails Jinchuriki, who harbors a deep hatred for you, is en route to the battlefield. The next moment, a flash of intense, pale lightning suddenly blazed not far away. Then, boom. Roars, thunder, wails, and a sudden, resounding howl of terror exploded simultaneously. Enemy attack. Chapter 209, Cloud and Thunder's old story, snake devouring oxen and ghosts. A day ago, in the land of hot water, outside Hell Valley, the midday sun shone through the drifting reddish clouds of Hell Valley, illuminating the towering cliffs that pierced the sky. Birds flew by, and the spring water flowed and scorched. Crouching on the cliff face, a sturdy, dark-skinned young man, wearing a white, one shoulder Kumagakure vest with a black lining, took a deep breath, removed his arm from the scalding spring, and stood up. He looked like the son of the third Hokage, the heir of the Kumagakure village, who had inherited the name Ai, looking down at the Hell Valley with rolling clouds and mist, which seemed bottomless and where no trace of human beings could be found. The young man Ai frowned. This kind of terrain is completely a natural prison. If you want to contact the Blood Pond clan in this situation, it is impossible not to alert the jailers, the Uchiha, and the security here has been tightened. He turned his head and asked in a deep voice to the half-crippled old man who was standing respectfully behind him, with one arm evaporated from the shoulder and horrible burn marks on his body. Lai, how did you contact the Blood Pond clan last time, Lord Ai? It has always been the Blood Pond that contacts us one way. In this kind of terrain, only the people of the Blood Pond clan can find the secret path out of the valley without alerting the Uchiha. And Tute, who knew the secret path, died at the hands of Uchiha Setsuna. Aha! The young man's eyes jumped suddenly, and he was furious. Suddenly, he swung his fist, flashing with lightning, and instantly smashed a nearby tree trunk, thick enough for a man to hug. Standing next to Ai, Karabi, a dark-skinned, flaxen-haired young man wearing black sunglasses and wielding 7 swords, grinned. He raised his arms, oblivious to the crowd, and swayed his body in a rapt gesture. Bakalu, Kugalu. Big brother will also suffer from this kind of headache. Let's move forward with force, thunderplow and hot blade, a combination of big brother and me. We will wipe out the old and powerful enemy in one fell swoop. Yet, here in his brother's usual element, young Ai couldn't help but jump in the face. However, being accustomed to this, he decisively chose to ignore Karabi's words and continued to stare at Ai and asked, "So, now we can only wait here for news from the Blood Pool clan?" Looking at the young Aisha's bulging fist, Ai shrank his head and didn't dare to respond. Of the 3 elite Kumagakure warriors tasked with this crucial mission, he was the only one to escape disastrously back to Kumagakure with a broken arm, forcing the village to dispatch the Abbey team to clean up their mess. This was shameful enough. And then, suddenly, a bolt of lightning descended from the sky before the 3 of them. After the lightning shattered on the cliff, a special white scroll fell. Staring at the scroll that had appeared out of nowhere, Lainey exclaimed in amazement, "This is the Heaven Sentence Technique. Has the village sent the latest intelligence? The Heaven Sentence Technique, an ninjutsu unique to Kumagakure, can teleport any object to any location at the speed of light, regardless of conditions or location. This technique is primarily used to transport objects, not humans. Ordinary people would be unable to keep up with the speed, resulting in their bodies being torn apart and killed. The only person who has successfully done so is the third Hokage." Young Ai raised an eyebrow, then picked up the scroll at his feet and unfolded it. Upon seeing this, his expression suddenly brightened. Uchiha Chi, a disciple of the 3 great ninjas of Konoha, a disciple of Orochimaru, who at the age of 12 killed Ebizo of the Sand Village. The village wants us to join forces with the Sand Village to take this brat's head, and this mission is even prioritized over liberating the Blood Pond clan. Meanwhile, the 2 figures behind him, hearing what young Ai said, their faces suddenly changed. Hearing this name, Lainey shuddered, as if transported back to the time when the 3 elite Kumagakure warriors had fought 2 mad Uchiha warriors in the abandoned village of U Country. Thinking back to that mad kid who fought Moroi to the death, risking his life, Lainey felt a chill run through his body, as if his PTSD had relapsed. He truly didn't want to see this Uchiha lunatic again. And this brat had grown so much in such a short time, even capable of killing Ebizo, a higher-ranking figure in the Sand Village? How is this possible? A month ago, he was clearly just a weak kid who could only throw shurikens and use detonating tags to blow himself up. Killer B instantly noticed another piece of information revealed in his big brother's words. This kid is Orochimaru's disciple. The key point is, Orochimaru. Thinking of this, Killer B's originally cynical expression suddenly subsided, and his face darkened. A strong hatred flashed in his eyes. The reason why Killer B was so emotionally aroused was because of another past event, the previous generation of the Eight-Tails Jinchuriki, Brubby, who died in the Hidden Cloud Village not long ago because of the rampage of the tailed beast. Brubby, whose original name was Fukei, was very good in ninjutsu, bloodline, ability, and morality. Therefore, the Eight-Tails Jinchuriki was implanted in his body, making him the Eight-Tails Jinchuriki. This person is undoubtedly a mentor to Killer B. 3 years ago, After passing the test of Dode's Thunder Plow Blade, Killer Bee became a candidate for the Eight Tails Jinchuriki. During this time, he accompanied his elder brothers, Young Ai and Brug, in defeating numerous ninjas from Tsunagakure and Iwagakure on the eve of the Third Shinobi World War. However, during a mission against Iwagakure, Killer Bee found himself in danger. Brug and Young Ai rescued him. It was during this time that Brug taught Killer Bee how to remain steadfast in the face of the Eight Tails. Ultimately, the young Killer Bee found the path to influencing the Eight Tails and becoming a perfect Jinchuriki. However, this mentor had recently perished when the Eight Tails went berserk, causing severe damage to Kumagakure. The Third Raikage led elite ninjas to recapture the berserk Eight Tails, but this still resulted in the loss of 8 elite Kumagakure members. It was also during this battle that Young Ai achieved the remarkable feat of severing the Eight Tails' horns. Killer Bee initially believed it was just a sudden, unforeseen event, like a natural disaster, and initially felt only sadness for Broob. However, after truly becoming the perfect Eight Tails Jinchuriki, he learned the truth. Broob's rampage was caused by Konoha's Orochimaru, who had infiltrated Kumagakure during a period of weakness and paralyzed Broob using a special illusion pill. Orochimaru then broke the iron seal that sealed the Eight Tails, triggering the tailed beast's rampage. This resulted in the death of his mentor, Broob. Orochimaru then seized the opportunity to steal a sample of the Eight Tails' horn, severed by the young Ai, and took it back to cultivate and research. In this incident, due to Orochimaru's special illusion pill, the Eight Tails Jayuki was unable to recall what had happened during that time. However, for unknown reasons, the pill's effects suddenly wore off, and the Eight Tails suddenly remembered the truth of that day and revealed it to Killer Bee. Therefore, the culprit behind all this was Orochimaru. Big Brother. Recalling this, Killer Bee couldn't help but take a step forward, about to ask his big brother to take down Orochimaru's disciple, so that Orochimaru could also taste the pain of losing someone dear to him. At this moment, the young man standing at the edge of the cliff paused for a moment. This seemingly rough and irritable, yet incredibly thoughtful man narrowed his eyes and spoke in a deep voice, "This is a perfect opportunity, B. Rami, there's no need to hide your tracks. The two of you will set out immediately, cooperate with Tsunagakure and take down this brat named Uchiha Chi." Hearing this, Rami was stunned. "Me? Take down Uchiha Chi? No, the intelligence clearly states it. This brat just took down Ebizo. How can I fight this crazy brat?" Meanwhile, Killer Bee was also stunned by his big brother's order. For a moment, he couldn't understand what his big brother was trying to do. However, this was exactly what he wanted. Killer Bee suddenly showed a bright smile on his face. He turned around and patted the confused Lamy on the shoulder, and rapped in a rhyme like a machine, "Lamy, let's move forward like crazy and kill the Uchiha bastard brat. The battle has begun, move forward powerfully, oh yeah." If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 210, the battle begins within 3 seconds of meeting. Thunderplow and hot knife. Amidst the gloomy sky, blue lightning streaked, instantly illuminating the world in a bleak white. The wailing night wind echoed with a roar of thunder from the heavens. In the forested mountains bordering the land of hot water and the land of fire, a crack. Hard boots crushed dead branches, skimming through pools of blood, crushing the dust, and finally settling into view. A tall man in a black robe with a hooded collar approached calmly, casually throwing the young man holding his throat to the ground. With a faint sigh, he said, "Tisk, what a pity. Your heart isn't tasty enough." Upon seeing this man, Uchiha Chi's pupils narrowed. He immediately recognized him as Kokuzu, the long-lost S-rank traitor from Takanin, who had once pushed him to the brink of death. "Mizuno, how could this happen?" Behind him, Old Chen looked at the young man thrown at Kokuzu's feet in horror, and recognized that it was Mizuno Yuki who was in charge of patrol. He couldn't help but exclaimed, then raised his head and looked angrily at Kokuzu who caused all this. "You guy, what have you done?" However, Kokuzu didn't even look at Old Chen, but just stared at Uchiha Chi dimly, and said lightly, "It's just as I expected. With this formation, as long as we find the position of the general, we can find you." He paused, his tone sank, and he shouted coldly, "Uchiha Chi." Uchiha Chi suddenly exhaled, tightly grasped the Kusanagi sword in his hand, and said to the old man behind him without turning his head, Teacher Chen, you step back, boy, what did you say? Hearing this, old Chen was stunned for a moment, and then said, don't underestimate me, I am the strongest in Konoha. Uchiha Chi shook his head and immediately interrupted, Teacher Chen, your task is only to assist the main elite in fighting. Although old Chen is known as the strongest physical ninja in Konoha at this time, he does not possess techniques such as the 8 gates of Dunjia. It was clearly unrealistic for the Konoha dragon god to close the gap with a true Hokage-level expert on his own. And Uchiha Chi paused, took a deep breath, stepped forward, grasped the hilt of his sword with both hands, and shouted in a deep voice, I am the ace. As soon as he finished speaking, Uchiha Chi suddenly opened his eyes, staggered, and twisted his foot to the ground, moving in a circular motion. With a backhand, he pulled a kunai from the ninja tool bag at his waist and launched it. Swish! The kunai pierced the air, creating a sonic boom, and suddenly aimed straight at Kokuzu's face. However, Kokuzu simply tilted his head slightly, avoiding the kunai. At the same time, the curse seal on Uchiha Chi's neck began to spread, transforming into a series of pitch-black lines that instantly covered his entire body. Curse Seal 1, fully activated. With a single foot strike, he shot out like an arrow. So fast, having just dodged the kunai, Kokuzu was stunned to discover that Uchiha Chi, moving backward, was even faster than the kunai. Almost instantly, he dashed in front of him, swung his longsword, and slashed at the heart beneath his black robe. Kokuzu immediately leaped back, raising his palm and using Earth Spear to harden his arm. He then clenched his fist and struck it with a blow. The air in front of his arm was instantly squeezed, creating a muffled sound as it collided with a Kusanagi sword. Bang! Sparks flew. With this force, Kokuzu rolled backward and landed on his feet. His left hand firmly grasped the Kusanagi sword, and his right fist slammed into Uchiha Chi's face. Boom! His fist, like a diamond that could strike anything, whipped up a gust of wind, lifting the roots of Uchiha Chi's hair high. Uchiha Chi immediately raised his head, gnashing his teeth and yanking. The tip of the kunai he had previously fired instantly straightened, and a silk thread suddenly appeared in the air, slicing towards Kokuzu's right arm at the elbow joint. Silent and colorless, yet like the sharpest blade in the world. With Uchiha Chi's experience using the Earth Style and Earth Spear, he immediately determined that Kokuzu had only hardened his fists, not his arm joints, in order to maintain the fluidity of his attack. However, Kokuzu suddenly changed the momentum of his fist, spreading his 5 fingers to release the hardness. He quickly pulled down to avoid a silk thread, grabbed Uchiha Chi's collar and tugged, then staggered his foot to kick Uchiha Chi's left foot, about to trip him, and then threw him to the ground with an over-the-shoulder throw. Uchiha Chi also realized his opponent's intention, but at this moment, he was no longer the weakling who could only be ravaged by Kokuzu's physical skills. He immediately stumbled back, drawing his sword with his right hand, forcibly allowing Kokuzu to shred his collar. He twisted his body, drawing the blade in a circular motion, and using the remaining momentum, he leaped forward and slashed at Kokuzu's neck. Pulling his left hand back, he formed a Chen seal. A surge of wind surged from his palm, rising and transforming into a long, empty sword, which suddenly shot towards Kokuzu's heart beneath his black robe. And that wasn't the end yet. Jiraiya's ninjutsu, the chaotic lion technique, suddenly activated. The ends of his hair quietly lengthened, and he was about to unleash 1,000 strands of hair at Kokuzu. Under attack from 3 sides, Kokuzu frowned, sensing the danger, and abandoned his offensive intentions. He first stepped back, leaning back to avoid the long sword that was swiping towards his neck, then slamming his palm onto the ground, slapping it sideways and leaping out, creating distance between him and Uchiha Chi. Uchiha Chi frowned slightly. His taijutsu, honed through countless battles, still proved powerless against Kokuzu. Therefore, to defeat Kokuzu, he needed to prove his true strength in ninjutsu. Just as he was about to release the seals on his body and activate Fire-style Chakra mode and Zero Tail, Kokuzu. HMPH, your taijutsu has improved somewhat. He glanced at the slit in his robe and glanced at Uchiha Chi, a slight fear rising in his heart. This brat's growth rate had completely exceeded his expectations. However, he quickly sneered, but, poor brat, your opponent is no match for me. With those words, Kokuzu turned and leaped out without a backward glance, heading for the Konoha ninja gathering not far to the side. Uchiha Chi was stunned, a little confused. We haven't even exchanged a few rounds, haven't even warmed up yet, Enkokuzu is already running away again. He was about to give chase and took a step, but the next moment, Uchiha Chi suddenly felt a palpitation and a chill on the back of his neck. Subconsciously, he stopped, not caring about his elegant posture, and squatted down with his head in his hands. At this moment, a wild and rhyming voice suddenly exploded behind him. The Killer Bee uncle, who is calm and charming, with the 8 tails as the climax, is here. Oh. Yes, brain. Scatter, my tricks are on full display. Yet, along with a rough and fanatical voice, a straight lightning flashed in the mountains and forests behind him. A sturdy figure with a dark complexion stepped on 4 giant trees in succession and attacked at an extremely terrifying speed. From a very far distance, in a flash, it cut through the air, leaves, dust and hot wind. Swinging his arms flashing with thunder, he aimed at the back of Uchiha Chi's head and slashed across. Thunderplow Hot Knife. Chapter 211, Rebuilding the Glory of Uchiha. Thunderplow, Hot Blade. This move utilizes the unique lightning release chakra mode of the hidden cloud village. It gathers lightning armor throughout the body, colliding with the enemy with the force of its body, and using its immense wrist strength to deliver a fatal blow. This process increases the speed to a level similar to lightning, with immense destructive power. In the original story, the lightning armor unleashed by the 4th Hokage was so powerful that even the main Gekai of Sharingan could not see it clearly. Such speed could even dodge Amaterasu, triggered by a flash of sight. The pale lightning illuminated Uchiha Chi's face with a pale pallor. Oh my god, this stunned Uchiha Chi. Before this, he had never met Killer Bee, the 8 tails Jinchuriki of the hidden cloud village, let alone any enmity. But now, not only did the dashboard indicate that the other party harbored a deep hatred for him, but his every strike was a killing blow. He had no idea how he had provoked this master. Instantly, like a bolt of lightning tearing through the night, it slashed down from the forest hundreds of meters away in the blink of an eye. Uchiha Chi's pupils suddenly shrank, his twin Magatama Sharingans unable to keep up with his speed. His scalp tingled, but fortunately, his keen instincts, triggered by his battle instincts, allowed him to dodge in advance. In the critical moment, he immediately formed the Chen seal with one hand and used the wind style, fierce wind palm to suddenly launch a gust of wind, forcibly displacing himself a distance. He then rolled several times on the ground, then slapped the ground with a high five and leaped back up. At this moment, boom! The lightning suddenly crashed to the ground like a heavy hammer. The ground was shattered by the powerful elbow strike, and dense cracks instantly spread like a spider web. Oh? Missed? Amidst the dust, Killer Bee frowned, his sunglasses tilted slightly. Immediately, he glanced to the side and saw a young man with black hair and red eyes brushing the dust off his trouser legs not far away. He looked at him indifferently, as if nothing had happened. The 8 tails Jinchuriki of the hidden cloud village, what a joke. As a Jinchuriki, you dare to attack an Uchiha? Why, you want to dance too? Hearing the boy's arrogant words, Killer Bee grinned, revealing 2 rows of white teeth beneath his dark skin. What an arrogant brat, but I'm in a bad mood right now, and I'm thinking of some cruel things in the past, so I'll play with you, Bakalu, Kugalu. Baby. The moment the words fell, boom! A violent wind erupted from around Killer Bee. Crimson chakra surged from his body, forming a tailed beast coat with floating bubbles on it. Donning the tailed beast garb, Killer Bee straightened his back and gripped a red hilt behind him with his back hand. His eyes suddenly turned cold. Next move, I'll kill you. Unlike the casual banter he'd had with Sasuke when he'd just opened his main Gekai Sharingan, exploring everything from swordsmanship to various forms, Killer Bee, who harbored a deep hatred for Orochimaru and extended this hatred towards Uchiha Chi, was now absolutely serious. Uchiha Chi's eyes narrowed slightly at the sight of his opponent's stance. Donning the tailed beast garb, wielding the long sword with his human form. This posture and this imposing aura instantly recognized Killer Bee as he was about to unleash his unique 8-sword style, a definitive 8-sword style that combined the A-rank taijutsu of the Aragami Heron Blade, the supersonic thunder blade imbued with lightning release chakra, the speed and power enhanced by the 8-tailed beast garb, and the controllable first 8 swords. In this form, Killer Bee was even more threatening in close combat than a half-tailed beast, a runaway Jinchuriki. After hearing what he had said, Uchiha Chi could guess why Killer Bee harbored such intense hatred for him. He vaguely remembered that in the original story, Orochimaru had infiltrated Kumagakure in his early years, causing the 8-tails rampage, stealing a sample of its horn, and then giving the then Jinchuriki, a man named Bee, a genjutsu pill capable of controlling even the tailed beasts. It now appeared that the genjutsu seal contained in the pill had been broken by Orochimaru after he left the village. At this thought, Uchiha couldn't help but sneer, muttering, "Teacher Orochimaru, is this also part of your plan?" He looked at Killer Bee, ready to attack, his eyes suddenly filled with a fierce fighting spirit. I found a perfect opponent." Uchiha took a deep breath, stared intently at Killer Bee, his lips curled slightly, his chin raised, and he spoke with a defiant indifference, "Eight Tails, just right, I've just learned a new sword technique." Uchiha slowly drew out his Kusanagi sword, the tip of which pointed directly at Killer Bee's nose. "In that case, then please me with your utter disgrace." Killer Bee's face darkened at this. Disrespectful brat. Initially, he had simply wanted to dispatch this brat cleanly, avenging Orochimaru while fulfilling his elder brother's mission. However, upon actually confronting this brat, he realized, every movement, every look, every word, of this brat precisely crossed the line of intolerance for a Jinchuuriki. Especially that disdainful gaze, treating the tailed beasts like playthings. He and the eight-tailed Gyuki within him couldn't help but frown, cursing in Killer Bee's mind. "One last warning, I am Killer Bee, the eight-tailed demon." As soon as he finished speaking, Killer Bee suddenly drew his swords. The 7 swords on his back instantly soared into the air, landing precisely on various parts of Killer Bee's body, mouth, knees, elbows, and armpits. In a strange posture, he simultaneously grasped 7 long swords in various parts of his body, while his hands were responsible for flexing the swords in combat. This was the Aragaki Sagaru Hado. An extremely difficult, disruptive sword technique, wielding 7 swords in a dance, launching instantaneous attacks on all the enemy's vital points. Even ninjas skilled in swordsmanship would find it difficult to detect this sword technique. In the original novel, Hirutosuke overestimated his own abilities when he challenged Killer Bee to a sword fight, only to be completely snared by the swordsmanship. If it weren't for the 3 healers on his team, he'd have been stranded in Yunlei Gorge. But now, Arashiro Futoshi, the handsome Uchiha, the burly brown-skinned man, and a sword fight. The elements are all there. Uchiha glanced at the Kusanagi sword, the same model as Uchiha, and couldn't help but smile. Uchiha was defeated so miserably because he never learned the secret swordsmanship of our Uchiha clan. And now, I will restore the glory of the Uchiha clan. Chapter 212, Dance of the Sun Halo vs. Wonglu's Blade. Sword Leaping Flame. In the blink of an eye, the wind on the field suddenly moved. Uchiha turned his head instantly, and the pupils in his eyes quietly transformed into vertical pupils. Natural energy poured into his eyes along the surging meridians. As soon as the 360-degree infrared vision opened, he saw, a blurry crimson figure had already tumbled into the air. The 2 knives clamped between his armpits and elbows slid to his neck as he leaped, trapped by his raised shoulders. As he tumbled through the air, Killer Bee raised his leg and swung the knives clamped between his knees into the air, grasping them with both hands. With a powerful and heavy slash of both knives, he slashed at Uchiha's arms. As his neck twisted, the knife in his mouth and the 2 knives clamped between his neck and shoulders slashed 3 cold rays, slicing at Uchiha's eyes and neck. Killer Bee, meanwhile, sliced and kicked the other 2 blades mid-air with dazzling skill. One spun and slashed towards Uchiha's waist and abdomen, while the last blade, struck with a kick, stabbed directly into Uchiha's heart. Suddenly, 7 blades slashed at different locations. A dazzling display of murderous intent filled the air. Uchiha's serpentine pupils suddenly shrank. A wave of horror washed over him. Even with his 360-degree infrared vision, which allowed him to clearly see the paths of all the blades without moving his eyes, and his masterful shuriken technique, which allowed him to calculate the complex attacks, his body simply couldn't block all of them when faced with such complex swordplay. After all, Uchiha only had 1 sword, it was impossible for him to block 7 positions simultaneously. In the original novel, Sasuke was forced to retreat for this very reason when Killer Bee leaped towards him, protecting his eyes and heart. While dodging 3 blades, he raised his sword to block 2 in quick succession, continuing his retreat. He was then met with Killer Bee's relentless onslaught, forcing him to lose the initiative and take the brunt of the blows. Finally, a supersonic thunder blade, caught between the 7 blades, sent him careening away, sealing his defeat. By the time Sasuke retreated, the sword duel was already lost. But ninjutsu, making the impossible possible, overcoming impossible odds and achieving miracles. Facing Killer Bee's Aragaki Heron Blade, the most crucial factor in victory was not to lose the initiative. With this in mind, Uchiha Chi, ignoring the fact that he had only just learned the key taijutsu techniques and had yet to fully master the Uchiha family's inherited swordsmanship, was forced into a fight. However, unlike Sasuke who had 3 nurses, Uchiha Chi alone was more tolerant than Sasuke with 3 nurses. The idea flashed in a flash, and in a flash, Uchiha Chi had made a battle plan. Facing the 7 swords that were spinning and slashing from the air by Killer Bee, Uchiha Chi quietly revealed an extremely crazy smile on his face. Go, 8 Tails, I'll let you see it. What is a tolerant god? So, facing the 7 swords that were slashing at him, Uchiha Chi stood straight in place, motionless. He just twisted the hilt of the sword suddenly, held the sword and stabbed it at Killer Bee's forehead. He didn't even try to dodge. Because the Sharingan's regeneration wasn't certain, he needed to block it, but he couldn't let Killer Bee see that his eyes were his weakest point. So, Uchiha Chi chose to strike back, stabbing Killer Bee's head with his sword. If Killer Bee insisted on slashing his eyes with a knife in his mouth, he would stab Killer Bee's head with his sword. Offense instead of defense, life for life. Witnessing this, Elder Chen, who had been nervously clenching his palms behind him, widened his eyes and exclaimed nervously, "See brat, there's no way you can defeat that guy like this. Quickly, withdraw your sword. Dodge." Meanwhile, Killer Bee, swinging his sword in midair, was startled by the sight. But soon, facing Uchiha Chi's unflinching thrust towards his head, a hint of mockery flashed through his sunglasses. He tilted his neck to avoid the blow, and aside from the knife in his mouth and the one he'd released from his neck, the remaining 5 swords followed suit. Stupidity is over, dance, dance like butterflies. Instantly, a flash of swordlight flashed, and 5 blades flew. Puff, 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 puff. 5 streams of blood instantly sprayed high from Uchiha Chi's body. Killer Bee landed steadily in midair, and with dazzling movements, he retrieved his 7 blades and cut them again. He kicked out with his legs, sending 3 blades piercing Uchiha Chi's shoulder and forearm, while kicking him high into the air. Immediately, 3 blades shot out from his elbow, right hand, and right armpit, fiercely piercing Uchiha Chi's chest, abdomen, and thigh. The blade tightly grasped in his left hand slashed with a momentum, carving a huge gash from Uchiha Chi's neck to his left kidney. Finally, his entire body was illuminated by flashes of lightning, and he delivered a final slash with a crimson thunder plow's hot blade. 8 Tails, sting like a bee, swish, 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 swish. With a crisp sound of a blade piercing flesh, Uchiha Chi was instantly stabbed like a hedgehog. In mid-air, Uchiha Chi's eyes suddenly widened as he vomited a mouthful of blood. However, despite vomiting blood, he didn't show the slightest fear. Instead, he lowered his head and stared at Killer Bee, who was swinging his 8th sword at him, with a bloody, crazy grin on his lips and teeth. After 7 cuts, you still want to cut again, 8 Tails, you're too greedy. Now, it's my turn. Grabbing Killer Bee's 7th sword, he swung and retracted his arm, unleashing the thunder plow's hot blade. Uchiha Chi's face turned grim, and he suddenly swung the Kusanagi sword downward from mid-air, using inertia to spin his body up. A burst of flame suddenly appeared between his teeth. The next moment, the 4-symbol seal was released. The 8-trigram seal was released. The evil sealing seal was released. Heavy seals on his limbs, finger seals, 4 black snake bindings. Unleash, 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 unleash. All released. Long-lost power surged through his body once again. At this moment, 0 Tail, immortality, tailed beast physique, forbidden technique, flesh transformation, fire style, chakra mode, secret technique, earth grudge suture, heaven's curse seal, and curse seal mode I all unleashed. Through the terrifying physique bestowed by these forbidden techniques and secret arts, flesh and blood reassembled in an instant, flesh revived, and bones regenerated. The 6 knives that had pierced his body were instantly expelled by the repaired flesh and blood. A brilliant white line emanating from his heart instantly spread throughout his body, connecting with a vast mass of dark chakra in his abdomen. Boom! A huge sun shone forth from the sky. Leaping into the sun, Uchiha Chi's face showed no fear or hesitation. He suddenly twisted the hilt of his sword, spun around, and slashed down with all his might. Following the method described in the Uchiha style, Sun Dance Scroll, he channeled all his chakra and eye power into the sword, condensing it into a blazing white longsword that outshined the sun behind him. This was the first move of the Uchiha style, Sun Dance. Sword Leaping Flame. Chapter 213, Forbidden Swordsmanship, Ancient Legends. At this moment, Uchiha Chi swung his blindingly bright sword, spinning and slashing down with all his might. Killer Bee saw the imp's chakra suddenly surge, his aura surging wildly. He wielded a normal move he'd seen in other Uchiha swordsmen, slashing at him. Yes, the sword leaping in flames was just an ordinary move in Killer Bee's eyes. In reality, the Uchiha style's Sun Halo Dance sword technique itself was only a B-rank sword technique, typically using fire release to create flaming blades on the sword's blade. It was simply a ninja sword technique imbued with fire attributes. However, as this ordinary move unfolded in the hands of the imp before him, looking at the blazing white longsword in Uchiha Chi's hand, unlike the small flames enchanted on the blades of ordinary Uchiha clan ninjas, which burned even the air to the point of extreme distortion, Killer Bee's eyelids fluttered, and a sudden sense of foreboding rose in his heart. 7 swords fell, and Killer Bee took them, recreating the form of the Eiji no Hero slashing sword. The tailed beast's outer garment billowed. Subconsciously, he immediately borrowed more chakra from the 8 tails to increase his strength and speed. As the 7 swords slashed in a dazzling frenzy, Killer Bee's expression suddenly became serious. Indeed, as Uchiha Chi had suspected, the Eiji no Hero slashing sword was more of a dance than a sword technique, growing stronger and faster as the attack continued, inflicting increasing pressure on the opponent until they could no longer defend. However, once the rhythm of such a move was interrupted, it was difficult to reconnect. Killer Bee, who is proficient in swordsmanship and aware of his own shortcomings, naturally does not want the sword to stop. Just when he wanted to rely on the power of the tailed beast to forcibly block the sword from Uchiha Chi, an extremely terrifying cry suddenly rang out in Killer Bee's spiritual world. Bee, don't block the sword, back off immediately. This is not an ordinary sword leaping flame. When the 8-tailed Gyuki sensed the chakra blade in Uchiha Chi's hand that was rising with extremely high temperature, his face suddenly became solemn, as if he thought of some horrible memory. A bead of sweat larger than a dump truck suddenly flowed down his forehead. What, in the spiritual world? Killer Bee, who was sitting on the tip of Nia Gui's nose, was stunned for a moment, then asked, isn't this the Uchiha family's swordsmanship infused with fire chakra? It's just ordinary. I just need to release a little charm. Wow. Supersonic Thunder Blade, unmatched. No, Nia Gui immediately interrupted him, roaring with a grim expression, he's not using ordinary Uchiha swordsmanship. If I'm not mistaken, this is a forbidden swordsmanship passed down from an era even more distant than the Warring States period, when the Uchiha clan once possessed multiple pairs of Mangekyo Sharingan. In that era, a man named Uchiha Naga used this swordsmanship combined with the pupil techniques and forbidden techniques of the Mangekyo Sharingan to defeat all other competitors with a Mangekyo Sharingan and ascend to the position of clan leader, also the ruler of the world. In the end, he was defeated by the more talented Uchiha clan's powerful female ninja, Uchiha Jiji, Uchiha Naga Uchiha Ji. Killer Bee frowned, thought about it carefully, and spread his hands helplessly. I haven't heard of it. Nia Gui sighed suddenly. It's right that he hasn't heard of it. After all, that was a terrifying era second only to the era of 47 years ago, when the god of ninja and the Shura of the ninja world coexisted. An era when tailed beasts like it were regarded as playthings. At that time, the Uchiha clan possessed more than 10 pairs of Mangekyo and could even artificially cultivate humanoid weapons with a more extreme ultimate Mangekyo technique 8,000 spears. If it weren't for the civil strife, they almost unified the entire ninja world at that time. So until now, this period of history has been buried in the dust and no one can remember it anymore. Now, the Uchiha brat before him gave Nia Gui a very similar feeling to that terrifying man from back then. In short, don't underestimate this forbidden swordsmanship, especially the first strike, the 8-tailed Nia Gui shouted in a serious tone. This first strike, achieved by burning oneself, burning one's soul, burning everything, is the strongest strike in this swordsmanship. There's no need to fight him head-on, he'll charge on his own. As expected, this brat has already used the forbidden technique that complements this swordsmanship. All you have to do is temporarily avoid the attack and seize the moment when the forbidden technique fails to work, kill his true form, and then, understood, the situation was urgent. Before Nia Gui could finish his words, Killer Bee nodded immediately and instantly vanished from the spiritual world. As the 8-tailed Nia Gui spoke, He froze, staring at the ferocious Uchiha Chi, now approaching from the outside world. A pair of crimson, snake-like eyes seemed to pierce through Killer Bee's sunglasses and eyes, piercing straight into the spiritual world, and their gazes met. A chill suddenly ran down the Ushiki's spine, and his round pupils suddenly widened. After a moment's pause, he finally uttered the following words, "Wait, this brat only has a 2 Magatama Sharingan, he's not using Izanagi, what about this swordsmanship?" The mental exchange lasted only a moment. Back on the field, the moment Uchiha Chi's sword fell, Killer Bee immediately followed the Eight Tails' advice, swung his blade, and lashed out 3 more swords, trying to force Uchiha Chi to defend himself. He immediately twisted his feet, and the 4 tails that extended from his tailed beast coat slapped the ground. Using this force, he leaped back and somersaulted into the air. Want to run? Uchiha Chi suddenly raised his head and glared at Killer Bee fiercely. He simply ignored the 3 daggers aimed at him, allowing them to pierce the white scales of the second form of the curse seal and penetrate his body. The blazing white sword in his hand suddenly shone. As it spun beneath him, a violent blast of chakra erupted, causing his own spin to surge even faster. In an instant, Uchiha Chi transformed into a fiery streak of fire in the night sky, shooting out like an arrow through the darkness, piercing the dawn. The sword in his hand moved with him, and he suddenly spun again, slashing towards Killer Bee's face. Not good. Killer Bee's heart skipped a beat. No longer concerned with maintaining the rhythm of the Aragaki's sword, he immediately began to draw chakra. Simultaneously, the 8 tails within him released chakra, shouting, "Bee, use that." Looking at Uchiha Chi, who had advanced before him, his previous injuries completely healed, Killer Bee frowned and snorted coldly. Super speed regeneration, really annoying. Wait a moment, and I'll finish you off. As soon as he finished speaking, a violent chakra surge erupted from Killer Bee. Dark red chakra instantly spread from the iron seal on his chest to his entire body. As the dark red-tailed beast coat completely enveloped him, pale bones burst out from his body, connecting and reconstructing on his half-tailed beast body, forming a layer of white exoskeleton armor. The unleashing power of the half-tailed beast instantly thrust Killer Bee forward again, nearly escaping Uchiha Chi's sword's range. At that moment, Uchiha Chi's sword suddenly fell. A swish. A sizzling sound, like a hot knife cutting through butter, echoed instantly. The blazing white sword, concentrated to its extreme strength, swung out with a roar. The strike didn't strike Killer Bee's body, but instead struck the 3 tails of his tailed beast coat. The sword arced downward. The skeletal tailed beast coat, seemingly formidable in defense, melted instantly under the blow, like white paper encountering a flaming blade. And that wasn't the end. The core of the so-called sword-leaping flame lies in the last 2 words. In the next instant, a blade of air burst forth from the sword, igniting the compressed, accumulated air layer by layer before the radiant sword. After leaving the sword, a crescent-shaped, fiery red sword energy began to expand wildly, growing larger and longer. Appeared between heaven and earth in an instant. Chapter 214, Birds Flying in the Sky. Abba, cough. The fiery red sword energy brushed past Killer Bee's back. In an instant, it transformed from the sky and earth into a huge crescent-shaped fiery red sword energy over 40 meters long. Like a building collapsing, a violent storm like the world collapsing suddenly exploded and spread in all directions. The sword energy swept across in an instant, exploding the air, igniting the treetops, splitting the mountains and forests, and slashing diagonally into the surface of the earth. Boom, the earth and rocks collapsed, ashes flew high, and the charred sand and soil rose up like a tsunami, then crashed down. The mountains and forests covered by the sword energy instantly turned into a sea of fire. Trees burned and were uprooted, and birds flew away in panic. A huge ravine, bottomless and extending to the end of the site, suddenly appeared on the surface of the earth. Standing at the edge of this abyssal ravine, Old Chen struggled to shield his face from the raging wind, staring blankly at the terrifying scene that resembled the arrival of doomsday, a scene wrought only by the might of a god. His mustache couldn't help but tremble. How is this possible? This kid is so strong. Is this Konoha's trump card? At this moment, the immense thrust unleashed by the surging sword energy instantly propelled Uchiha Chi upwards once more. The very essence of the Halo dance, the very reason it's called a dance, lies in harnessing the sword energy released by the sword's leaping flames. Undoubtedly, this was a sword technique capable of soaring through the sky, clouds, and the radiant sun. In other words, Uchiha Chi could only truly dance if he freely controlled the thrust unleashed by the sword's leaping flames. He immediately calmed his mind, struggling to control his body as it was catapulted skyward by the high pressure. The advanced physical technique that old Chen had demonstrated to him kept flooding his mind. Complex knowledge woven and interwoven in his mind, it finally crystallized into 3 large characters: centrifugal force. Imagine yourself as a circular disk spinning around its center, with an angular velocity of Greek letter omega. And the blazing white sword in your hand is a wooden block of mass M attached to the disk, connected by a rope whose other end is fixed to the center of the disk, also the center of rotation. The rope's length is r. The wooden block rotates along with the disk. Assuming there's no friction, the block's rotation is due to the tension of the rope. According to the formula F equals m, the centripetal acceleration equals Greek letter omega 2 r equals v2, r equals 4, Greek letter pi 2, r, t2, and the mass m is m. Substituting the frictional force in the ninja world into the equation, we can calculate. Fuck, how can I possibly understand something this complicated? Uchiha Chi shook his head in midair, gazing at the ground receding and Killer Bee shrinking. He gritted his teeth. Anyway, I just have to spin, 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 spin. The next moment, thanks to the perfect control of the second form of the Heaven's Curse seal, Uchiha Chi's face darkened. He gripped the hilt of his sword with both hands, struggling to control his downward flip. Dancing halo, spin for me. Suddenly, a massive ball of blazing white fire plummeted from the night sky. Like a grand explosion of fireworks, a black-haired, red-eyed youth leaped from the flames, whirling and brandishing his long sword. Soaring through the sky, he swung his sword behind him, unleashing streams of sword energy like petals from the other shore. Or, gliding like a bird, he leaned forward, transforming into a line of fire barely discernible to the naked eye. Through the air, he continuously folded, leaped, spun, and charged. Each swing of his sword unleashed a fiery burst of energy, like the one just now. Streams of sword energy of varying lengths crisscrossed the heavens and earth, roaring forth with a roar, instantly transforming the entire mountain and forest into a sea of fire. Boom, 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 boom. Accompanied by the roar of countless sword energies ravaging the earth, Uchiha Chi's gaze grew brighter and more fiery, like a bougainvillea blossoming brilliantly in a sea of fire. The next moment, a subtitle suddenly popped up before his eyes: "You have mastered, Uchiha style, Halo Dance, Beyond Complete Edition, S+, Beginner." In the gloomy night sky, the line of fire flickered. After leaping across the air for nearly 1,000 meters, the horse suddenly turned. Staring straight down at the sky, stunned and unable to express himself, Killer Bee shot out. At that moment, the 8 tails within Killer Bee stared at the rapidly charging Uchiha Chi with a tingling scalp, roaring in horror. Damn it, this is impossible. Why is this brat immune to the cost of this technique? Why is he completely unharmed? How could someone be so capable of transforming a power that would cost a life for an ordinary person into a costless strike? He's even more talented than Uchiha Naga back then. Killer Bee nodded, gazing at the increasingly bright streak of fire streaking across the sky. Burning hearts, scorched feathers, the white flames of nirvana. Wow, such a breathtakingly magnificent swordsmanship. He took a deep breath, his gaze fixed intently on the charging Uchiha Chi, his lips curling up to reveal 2 rows of white teeth. A burning fighting spirit suddenly ignited in his eyes. In an instant, his hands clenched as blades, and a flash of lightning flashed. But when it comes to gorgeousness, I will never lose to you. In the spiritual world, seeing his own Jinchuriki showing such an expression, the 8 tails was immediately shocked and roared in horror. "Bee, what do you want to do? Just use the tailed beast ball to kill him. Don't fight with swordsmanship. That sword can melt your sword the moment it touches it. It's impossible to defeat this Uchiha who has surpassed his predecessors in the field of swordsmanship." However, after hearing this, Killer Bee showed an excited look on his face, staring at the Uchiha Chi who was spinning and leaping towards him. "What you mean is, that is to say, I have 7 or 8 chances to draw my sword and challenge this kind of swordsmanship." The 8 tails was immediately shocked and scolded in astonishment. "Are you crazy? That 8th sword is..." Killer Bee raised the corner of his mouth confidently. "Enough." Without waiting for the 8 tails to persuade him again, the next moment, lightning wrapped around Killer Bee's hand and poured into the sword. With the posture of a half-tailed beast, he once again took the posture of the wild heron sword. This time, he would challenge something he had never mastered before: half-tailed beast transformation, supersonic thunder release. wild heron blade. After striking this stance, Killer Bee suddenly stretched out a hand toward the sky, making a 6 sign. Immediately, he roared, "Ahoha!" cough. The moment his words fell, Killer Bee's foot twisted into the ground, his entire body swirling with intense lightning and the sinister black and red chakra of the tailed beasts. The terrifying force of his stomping instantly shattered the ground. Under this inhuman force, the earth and rock shattered into dust, and cracks spread wildly across the ground like spider webs. Under this unbridled power, Killer Bee suddenly transformed into a beam of light mingling blue, white, black, and red, shooting towards Uchiha Chi. At this moment, both of their speeds increased to a level indiscernible to the naked eye. In just a flash of thought, the blazing red light as bright as the sun collided with the mixed beams of blue, white, black and red, like a needle against a wheat spike. Chapter 215, The Sword Melts into 7 Swords, It's Time to Fight for Life. Amidst a swiftness too rapid to discern with the naked eye, the two, pushing their speed to the limit, could yet see each other in this relatively still world. The moment their eyes met, no words were needed, no expression, not even sight, hearing, touch, smell, or taste. All senses were abandoned in the fierce battle. All they could rely on, all they could trust was the swords they clenched tightly in their hands, the masterful swordsmanship honed through countless years of hard work, and the instincts etched into their muscles. Sweat poured forth, they swung their swords, panting heavily, clashing like wild beasts. Zzz! There was no clanking sound like the clinking of swords. From the sky, swung with immense momentum, the blazing white swords, flowing with terrifyingly high temperatures, the flames of the 40-meter-long sword, compressed entirely within the 3-foot-long blade. The resulting heat was an extreme heat. It made even conventional weapons pale in comparison, a heat that would transform them into molten iron upon contact. Despite the infusion of lightning-released chakra, the instant the lightning blade touched the blazing white longsword, it began to deform and melt. Just as the lightning blade was about to sever, Killer Bee immediately released his blade and, with a backhanded movement, drew a second blade from his armpit. Instantly imbued with lightning, he slashed diagonally, deflecting Uchiha Chi's sword swinging towards his neck. Killer Bee was not blind, he could see Uchiha Chi's super regenerative abilities. Facing such an immortal foe, it seemed as if no matter where he struck, it would be futile. This brought a deep sense of defeat. However, even at this juncture, he keenly sensed that in their first encounter, Uchiha Chi had only defended against the attack, blocking the blow aimed at his eyes. Perhaps this was his opponent's weakness. Seizing this brief opportunity to sever the blazing white longsword, he gripped the spike-like short blade tightly, raised the handle, and stabbed it straight into Uchiha Chi's eye socket. Facing this blow, Uchiha Chi's eyes narrowed slightly, his scarlet serpent pupils suddenly shrinking. It must be said that Killer Bee had made the right bet. Facing Killer Bee's complex origami heron blade, his eyes, now possessing 360-degree vision after their transformation, proved crucial. Not only did he need them to see the blade's path clearly, but they also helped maintain the second form of the heavenly curse seal, absorbing natural energy. This was the key to Uchiha Chi's strength. If broken, his entire system would be significantly weakened. Staring at the lightning dagger piercing his eyes, Uchiha Chi's eyes widened, bloodshot covering the whites of his eyes. Tears of blood gathered in his eye sockets and quietly fell. The moment Killer Bee struck his eyes, his gaze had already passed past a lightning blade and settled on Killer Bee's eyes behind his sunglasses. Immortal technique, Sharingan, white eyes of the blade. Roar! Instantly, a red dragon roared and flew from its eyes, swallowing the dragon ball. The white light it exhaled instantly pulled Killer Bee into the illusion world. The white light trembled, and a strong light and piercing sound exploded in an instant. Dragged into the illusion world, Killer Bee gritted his teeth, and a sharp, illusory pain coursed through his body. I didn't even make eye contact, and yet I was struck? How could there be such an unavoidable eye technique? Ouchie! Ouch! The 8 tails immediately responded to Killer Bee's call, assisting him in disrupting his chakra flow and helping him escape the illusion. Uchiha Chi seized the moment of Killer Bee's hesitation and swung his sword with all his might. The crescent-shaped fiery sword energy erupted again, the resulting thrust propelling him nearly 100 meters into the air, narrowly avoiding Killer Bee's blow. Within this 100-meter wide, rotating space, Uchiha Chi regained control of his body. With a thrust, he spun and leaped upward, using his rotation to change direction, then used the force to fold back and leap downward. The flaming sword shadows shot up, tracing an inverted V in midair. As Killer Bee broke free from the illusion, he felt a sense of imminent death at his neck. He freed himself from the blazing white sword, which instantly transformed into a massive crescent-shaped sword energy 40 meters long and over 2 meters wide, pressing down upon him. A violent storm roared, the ground trembled, and grass was uprooted. And behind the sword energy, Uchiha Chi, with a ferocious expression, returned, brandishing his sword as he slashed at his neck. Die, with a fierce cry, two sword shadows, one imaginary and one real, descended simultaneously, leaving no escape. He was there, looking directly at it, as if the sky had collapsed. A meteorite fire descended. Faced with such swordplay, Killer Bee suppressed the trembling in his heart and took a deep breath. You're the one who deserves to die. With a roar, Killer Bee's body erupted in a deep, dark red chakra wave. With one foot, he cracked the ground. Instead of retreating, he advanced, his entire body enveloped in the dark red coat of the tailed beasts. Layers of white bones clung to his body, forming an even more powerful exoskeleton armor. He grasped his swords with both hands, charging forward against the fiery red sword energy. The two short swords, swirled with lightning and the chakra of the tailed beasts, melted together, forcibly ripping through the fiery red sword energy and allowing him to leap out. Killer Bee, supporting himself with one hand, flipped and leaped into the air. He lifted the two lightning swords between his legs and launched them into a sweeping kick. Instantly, he leaped nearly 100 meters, hurtling towards Uchiha Chi's eyes. After landing, he raised his elbow and launched another powerful strike. As his foot twisted against the ground, his hands already grasped the final sword. Then, Killer Bee roared, sword in hand, and charged forward. Haha! Facing the three sonic thunder blades hurtling towards him, Uchiha Chi took a deep breath. He raised the fingers of his two hands gripping the hilts, interlocking his thumbs and pressing his left thumb upwards, forming the Chen seal. He exhaled a pale yellow vacuum gas, attaching it to the blazing white longsword. Two distinct chakras rapidly twisted, swirled, and merged within the blade, stirring up a waltz of wind and fire. Then, Uchiha Chi roared, his fangs bared, and suddenly swung his sword. Shoot the greatsword, flame wind dragon dance. In the next instant, the raging fire, fueled by the violent wind, erupted from the blazing white longsword into a lifelike fire dragon. Its scales were wind, its tendons were earth-wrapped threads, and its bones were the flowing flames of fire style, chakra mode. Almost instantly, the fire dragon, braving the wind, expanded to a massive height of nearly 50 meters. It circled in midair, its eyes blazing with rays as bright as the sun. It gazed down mercilessly at Killer Bee, who charged at it like an ant. From its maw, a fierce gust of wind and blazing flames blasted forth, like a rapidly expanding wall of fire. This move, a replica of Kokuzu's composite ninjutsu, the strange face explosion and flame wind dance, not only wielded the fire dragon downward, but also launched a massive wall of wind and fire, its original purpose. This wind wall proved incredibly effective against flying items. The three supersonic thunder blades pierced the wall of fire, their attack instantly dissipating. Uchiha Chi simply swept them aside, deflecting them one by one. Just as Uchiha Chi breathed a sigh of relief and was about to regroup, a sudden surge of wind erupted. A gaping hole was ripped through the wall of flames, melting the tailed beast's outer garments. Killer Bee, his face covered in burns, shot out from the hole, leaping in front of Uchiha Chi. He dropped to his seventh, melted sword, which had pierced the flames. Boy, Killer Bee grinned, raising his eighth sword in horror. The thunderplow blade. His arm, covered in burns and muscular, rose. A thunderous palm blade pierced Uchiha Chi's eyes. Remember this magnificent and handsome slash from Master B. There's no escaping this tragedy. However, just as the thunderhand blade was about to reach Uchiha Chi's eyes, it was too late to swing his sword to sever Killer Bee's arm. Fending off his attack, Uchiha Chi grinned fiercely. Come on, let's see who dies first. He suddenly raised his right hand, which was gripping the hilt, and aimed it at Killer Bee's chest. The blazing white flames flowing on the Kusanagi sword instantly flowed along the sword body to the arm. The arm instantly burst out with a light more dazzling than the sun. Sizzle, it was like the oil was leaking from the barbecue under the scorching flames, and it was like a fuse was being ignited. Inside Killer Bee's body, the eight-tailed Gyuki's eyelids suddenly twitched for some reason, and a sense of death lingered in its heart silently. It was startled and looked outside at Uchiha Chi's raised arm, which made him feel an inexplicable chill down his spine and his face distorted. No. Chapter 216 Tailed Beasts Volume 8. Shura's Gaze. Fire-style chakra mode had once caused an unexpected mishap at the hands of Uchiha Chi. During a battle against 300 Tsunagakure troops, Uchiha Chi, cornered by 2 sword strikes, severed his own arm, detonating the fire-style chakra mode within it. This single grenade ultimately resulted in an explosion even more terrifying than the previous 2 strikes. This blast instantly wiped out the remaining Tsunagakure troops. Later, Uchiha Chi concluded that the explosive power of a single fire-style chakra mode concentrated at a single point should be comparable to the magnitude of the blast he had struck at Kokuzu and Togohei Edo. Its ultimate potential was the flaming fist that shattered Hazuki Maingetsu's chakra blade with a single blow. To produce such a terrifying explosion, other factors must have been involved. This factor lies in the source of the forbidden technique of fire-style chakra mode. It burns chakra, whether it's violent dark chakra or nine tails chakra plucked from it. Once ignited, it's difficult to stop. Like a chain reaction, it's a mortal cycle of copying and pasting. Only by burning everything can a mortal body wield the divine power of Susanoo. According to normal logic, this forbidden technique can only be sought within, not without. However, due to Uchiha Chi's forbidden secret techniques that make him difficult to die and his absurd physical condition, perhaps he could try to replicate the explosion and ignite the 8 tails? So, at that moment, Uchiha Chi aimed at Killer Bee's chest. The Kumagakure Jinchuriki used the iron armor seal, a seal passed down through generations of Kumagakure. This seal was engraved on the chest. The 8 tails chakra flowed from this spot, clearly visible in his Sharingan. He simply needed to transfer all the power of his fire-style chakra mode to his arm, sever it, and detonate the grenade. Killer Bee, caught in the blast, would likely explode like a tinderbox. Setting off the 8 tails like a firework? What kind of scene would that be? This insane thought raced through Uchiha Chi's mind at that moment. He shut out all other thoughts, not even considering whether he would be killed by the explosion himself. He also didn't care that if he used this move, Killer Bee's handblade would pierce his eyes through their sockets and pierce them directly into his brain. He couldn't even imagine whether the 8 tails could actually be detonated through the 8 trigram seal. In short, it was better if it didn't. A close-range grenade might kill Killer Bee, but not Uchiha Chi. If it did, both would perish. To win in a desperate situation, the only thing to do was to put yourself on the line. With this thought, Uchiha Chi's eyes darkened, and he immediately manipulated the secret technique, Earthly Wrath, to continuously generate silk threads at his shoulder. It punctured blood vessels, severed muscles, cut bones, and chopped off his arm. Uchiha Chi raised his head and grinned, his crimson, snake-like eyes filled with madness staring straight at Killer Bee. He roared with joy, "Come on, meet me where I die." At that moment, Killer Bee raised his head and looked at Uchiha Chi in shock. He looked at the arm that had been severed and was constantly glowing, like a small sun in the night sky. He sensed the terrifying power that was about to explode, and his heart trembled wildly, his scalp tingling. You, madman. This Uchiha brat was undoubtedly a madman. His 8th blade could blind Uchiha Chi, but Killer Bee knew his intelligence. This approach would only injure Uchiha Chi, but not kill him. At most, it would gain a certain advantage. If he wanted to win, he would have to wait and see in the next battle. But why? It was like a game of cards where both players had just matched 3 against 4, and they still had a bunch of cards left to play. He'd just thrown out a pair of 6s, and Uchiha Chi countered with a king bomb? No, what were you trying to do? At that moment, the 8-tailed Gyuki within Killer Bee could no longer sit still. He abruptly rose from his sealed space, sensing the blinding octopus arm outside, watching it explode. While the explosion was clearly no match for the power of a single-tailed beast ball, he had a chilling premonition that this thing could kill him. If he died here, not only would he lose a relatively pleasing Jinchuriki, but his future rebirth would also bring him into father-son duo matchup with 2 reckless Kumagakure thugs. This was a situation he absolutely did not want to see. "Sorry, B, I can't let you mess around anymore." The 8-tailed Gyuki suddenly reared up, pounding his chest with his mighty arms. He raised his head and let out a roar that shook the entire spiritual world. Roar. The next moment, Killer Bee, soaring through the air and about to elbow Uchiha Chi, suddenly stopped in midair. The clarity in his eyes was shattered by the 8 tails chakra, leaving only the 8 tails destructive, black and red divine light. The tailed beast's chakra, wrapped around his body, completely retracted. Then, 8 gigantic octopus tentacles, over 10 meters long, suddenly stretched out and curled high, completely enveloping Killer Bee. With a roar that resounded throughout the real world, the tentacles grew larger and taller, until they ballooned to over 70 meters in height. Suddenly, they stretched out, revealing the 8 tails' complete form, a giant bull with a tail resembling octopus tentacles. Roar, a roar resounded through the sky, shaking the earth. The Gyuki, a figure the size of a skyscraper, could pluck clouds from the night sky with a single hand. The true form of the tailed beast, whose sheer size had instilled despair in countless ninjas, had descended. However, upon its arrival, the 8-tailed Gyuki trembled, casting a fearful glance at a tiny speck of light flying toward its towering form. Its instincts told it not to let the object, even a sliver of light, get close to it. The next moment, a hurricane greater in scale and more terrifying than Uchiha Chi's shooting greatsword, Flame Wind Dragon Dance erupted from the ground. Using the 8 tails power technique, it enveloped itself with its tentacles and immediately began to spin wildly, creating a terrifying storm of immense scale, powerful enough to alter the terrain over vast areas. Tailed Beast Hachimaki, like a tan, oval top over 70 meters tall, it began to spin. The earth, the vegetation, the insects and rocks, the forest set ablaze by Uchiha Chi, the dark clouds brooding in the night sky, the blue lightning streaking through them, all were swept up by the storm, lifted high, and flung away. Under the 8-tailed Gyuki's deliberate targeting, Uchiha Chi's arm was first pushed back by the chakra storm of the fully manifested tailed beast, then suddenly blown high into the air by the storm created by the 8-tailed beast. It was flung far beyond the sight, transformed into a flaming star, and then exploded with a ball of light, not much larger than the 8-tailed beast. Boom! It seemed to have collapsed something, and the ball of light quickly vanished. However, at that moment, Uchiha Chi, who was leaning on the Kusanagi sword stuck in the ground with one hand, struggling to resist the storm and prevent himself from being blown away, felt an inexplicable chill down his spine. In the extremely keen perception of the body in the second form of the curse seal, this sense of horror did not come from the 8 tails that was turning, but more like, there was some terrifying thing in the place where his grenade blew up, glancing at him. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 217, Lure the Tiger Away from the Mountain, Uwu City Flame. A maze of veins weaves through the ninja world, connecting the border kingdoms of Yu, Shimo, Taki, and Kusa, until it reaches a desolate mountain cemetery housing the Outer Path demon statue. Within the land of Yu, beneath a deep, dark cavern, Uchiha Madara lies dozing on his stone bed, eyes closed. Having eked out a lifespan from the chaotic Warring States period, he has aged terribly. His skin is sagging, his eyes are sagging, and from not smiling for so long, his nasolabial folds stretched down to his jaw, giving him a stern, old-fashioned look. Though he appears to be in his 60s, he is in fact over 90. Now, he relies solely on the life force provided by the Outer Path demon statue to maintain his mobility. This, however, is but a temporary solution. Whenever he closes his eyes, he is haunted by memories of the past, transporting himself to the battlefields where he faced his nemesis, to the body of that youthful, passionate man. However, time drags on, and every memory brings tears. Fortunately, everything was proceeding according to Uchiha Madara's will. He would eventually return to his peak, illuminate the world with his eyes, unleash the ultimate illusion unparalleled in history, and create anew. But at that moment, in the darkness, Uchiha Madara suddenly opened his crimson eyes and gazed toward the cave ceiling. He sensed a familiar technique, hurtling toward him. Silently, a massive blue skeleton rose around him. Then, the skeleton rapidly solidified, rapidly transitioning from a new skeleton to skeleton, transforming into a blue, four-armed giant. The blue lightsaber grasped in one arm pierced the cave ceiling like a hot knife through butter. With his other hand, he grasped an object about to explode. Squeak. Squeak. It was like grasping an exploding sun. The aftermath of the blast, accompanied by a dazzling burst of light, erupted. HMPH, however, with the cold snort from Uchiha Madara, everything fell silent. Uchiha Madara waved his hand, grasping the object with his palm. Using the secret technique of chakra devouring, he suppressed, absorbed, crushed, and exploded the violent chakra within it. Then, looking at the charred arm in his hand, he raised an eyebrow. Is this chakra from the Eight Tails and that brat, and this technique, the Higurashi dance of the delusional one, the poor little dog that was beaten and fled in fear back then has actually achieved this level of skill? He, for the first time in a long time, a subtle smile crossed Uchiha Madara's face. At that moment, a pale-skinned man, half wrapped in pitcher plants, suddenly emerged from the cliff face of the cave. Madara-sama, what happened up there? Uchiha Madara ignored White Zetsu and indifferently ordered, I'm going to be out for a moment, fix this here. After all, we'll have to bury a treacherous stray dog here later. With that, dragging his aged body, Uchiha Madara silently leaped out of the massive hole punctured by his own icy strength. With a few light leaps, he stood atop a towering tree. His eyes narrowed slightly as he cast a glance at the battlefield still raging in the distance. Elsewhere, in the land of hot water, within Hell Valley, a thick fog enveloped the surroundings. Beneath the mirror-like cliffs lay pools of blood, bubbling and exploding with scorching vapor. A group of ragged, emaciated figures stood cautiously at the edge of the pools. The pool of blood at their feet reflected their slightly frightened faces, as well as the determined, muscular young man standing before them, clad in a Kumagakure uniform. This man was none other than the future fourth Hokage, son of the third Hokage, Ai. Earlier, upon receiving crucial intelligence from the village originating from Tsunagakure, he had instructed Killer Bee and Lamei to proceed without concealment, aiming to intercept the Konoha reinforcements. His true purpose was to distract the Uchiha defenders and create a rift in Jigakuri's seemingly impenetrable defenses. Ai, seizing this opportunity, with his exceptional speed, secretly infiltrated Jigakuri and attempted to negotiate with the Blood Pond clan imprisoned there. At this time, he was frowning and staring at the ragged people in front of him. He felt a little sad to see the Blood Pond clan, who were once nobles of the Land of Thunder and possessed a bloodline limit comparable to the Sharingan, and were arrogant and domineering, now fell into such a situation. At this moment, the leader of the Blood Pond clan, an old man with white hair and beard, a thin figure, but a pair of ferocious three white eyes, after listening to Ai's radical plan, he couldn't help but show hesitation, stepped forward, saluted, and said with a wry smile, Lord Ai, we understand what you said, but, now the Uchiha clan has increased the number of guards again, and the passages out of the valley are blocked. In addition, there is that old man Uchiha Setsuna in charge of Hell Valley. Isn't it too dangerous for you to ask us to cooperate like this? Kumagakure promised to guarantee our safety, and that is why we are willing to serve the third Hokage. Every day we have to endure this scalding boiling water, rely on birds shot down from the sky, and gnaw on sparse grass leaves to survive. With such a life, our combat effectiveness has been enough. Before the old man could continue to complain, Ai interrupted him rudely. He looked down at the old man in front of him with his height that was a head taller than the other man, and said coldly, at this point, you, the Blood Pond clan, still don't understand the current situation. After what happened, you have completely angered the daimyo and have completely lost the chance to become nobles of the Land of Lightning again. Now, you are a pool of dry bones destined to melt in the Valley of Hell. You are a fallen clan that can't even be called stray dogs after losing the master who put collars on you and made you declare your allegiance. If the Third Ninja World War had not already broken out in the outside world and Kumagakure just needed your strength, I would not have come here at all. And I would not have even given you a second glance, a whining old man. This is reality. Ai's words were unpleasant to the ear, but they made all the members of the Blood Pond clan fall silent, unable to refute. Glancing at the expressions of the Blood Pond members, Ai nodded. After a moment's silence, he spoke, you are not the only ones with these difficulties. To save you, Kumagakure's elite Jonin, my father's right-hand man, Dode, and Moroi, a promising special Jonin from the barrier squad, all died in the Land of Hot Water. Upon hearing this, the Blood Pond members looked up and exchanged glances. Ai paused, then raised his head to look at the group. His face gravely, he spoke. And what I'm saying isn't a bargaining chip for you to consider. I simply want to tell you, Kumagakure is a village bound by brotherhood. We welcome your clan with open arms, treating you as half-brothers, but the situation is vastly different now. Kumagakure will only act this once. If this fails, we will immediately detour to the Land of Rice and abandon Hell Valley. If you still hold on to your past aristocratic heirs and cannot make the decision that belongs to a ninja, then don't blame me for not being able to save you. After saying this, I looked straight at the people of the Blood Pond clan, counting down silently in his heart, waiting for their decision. After hearing this, the fierce-faced old man with 3 white eyebrows fell silent again. After thinking again and again between danger and the future for a long time, he suddenly sighed, his face sullen, and stretched out his arm to Ai, clenching his fist. This is no longer the etiquette of the nobles, but a unique way of making an agreement in the hidden cloud village. Upon seeing this, the young man Ai showed a hearty smile, waved his arms, and made the 2 clenched arms collide together. Lord Ai, the fate of the Blood Pond clan is in your hands. At this moment, the Cloud Village and the Blood Pond clan reached a reconciliation that had not been reached for thousands of years. And it seemed to be a historic moment, when the people of the Blood Pond clan around were a little emotional. In the corner of the crowd, there was a young man with an indifferent face, light gray-green hair hanging down his shoulders, dark circles under his eyes as if he had not slept well for a month, and eyes full of coldness. This young man abandoned the surname of the Blood Pond and named himself Miyashiro-en. He looked at everything that was happening in front of him indifferently, at the excited crowd, at the clan leader and the son of the Hokage who exchanged a brotherhood agreement, and at the edge of the Blood Pond, the lifeless weed that was crushed by the 2 people's feet. Suddenly, he laughed. He laughed like a devil. Chapter 218, Zero Tail, Come and Fight It. At the border between the land of hot water and the land of fire, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The violent wind whipped up by the tailed beast's true form suddenly swept up everything around it. Even the very ground beneath their feet was being torn away, inch by inch, merging into the terrifying tornado that connected heaven and earth. Shit, Uchiha cursed, his mouth full of sand. He could only tightly grasp the hilt of the Kusanagi sword, which was deeply embedded in the ground, with only the handle sticking out. Like a fluttering flag, he was lifted high, twitching in the wind. The gust of wind whipped in like a razor's edge, lifting Uchiha's hair high and rustling his high-collared robe, half torn at the collar. Hulu 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 hulu, even Uchiha's mouth was blown open by the wind, exposing his teeth. The skin at the corners of his eyes and mouth was pulled back violently. Saliva, blood, tears, and blood from his severed left shoulder splattered backwards. The wind from the 8 tails was far more powerful than the single lash of Manabu's tail. Even at this moment, Uchiha was still in the mood to think like this. But this attack was completely worth it. With just one arm, he forced Killer Bee to use the 8-tailed beasts. This also meant that he had finally revealed his opponent's true strength. With all the information on Killer Bee, Uchiha knew that the real battle was coming. Abandoning his human form, he would control the beast. A single strike of this technique could unleash the terrifying scale and power of an S-rank ninjutsu, while also possessing a terrifying, tailed beast all capable of flattening a vast area with a single strike. This attitude of big is beautiful, more is better is the true terror of the tailed beast Jinchuriki. It is also their most powerful combat form. Unfortunately, Uchiha lacks the height of a taller beast, relying on his tiny frame, less than 2 meters tall, to engage in a bloody, fist-to-fist battle with this behemoth. Thinking of this, Uchiha tilted his head slightly, gazing at the gloomy night sky before him, swirling like a tornado, a vast circular opening. Bathed in the radiant white moonlight, a savage beast stood between heaven and earth. For a moment, Uchiha felt a slight headache. Although he had forced the opponent into such a desperate situation, he had no clear idea how to fight such a thing. Finally, Uchiha could only shift his gaze to his abdomen. After the raging wind gradually subsided, he landed steadily on the ground, his gaze fixed intently on his own tailed beast. He rubbed his hands together and spoke expectantly, "Zio Ling, my buddy has already unleashed the grandson's tailed beast's true form, now, it's your turn to perform, quick, show some power." Within the 8 trigram seal, Zio Ling's tail blinked its white, hollow eyes at the call of its foolish master, and the entire snake trembled. It first compared its own less than 3-inch length with a nearly 80-meter tall 8-tails in its full form outside. Then, it stirred its serpentine body and slowly raised the tip of its tail, pointing it at itself. Then, he roared passionately, "Chew! Chew chew chew, didn't I tell you to fight the 8-tails?" Uchiha coughed, trying to coax him gently. "Can't you absorb the chakra of tailed beasts? Just like you did with the 9 tails last time?" Hearing Uchiha's explanation, Zero Tails scratched his head. He immediately raised his head, removed his mask, and gasped with a flared nostril. And then, nothing happened. Uchiha Chi and Zero Tails stared at each other, feeling the lack of any internal growth. After a long moment, Zero Tails scratched his head and howled at the top of his lungs, "Chew, can't absorb." "Wait, what are you talking about?" Uchiha Chi's expression suddenly changed drastically. "Why? He could absorb the 9 tails chakra, but not the 8 tails? Could it be because Killer Bee was a perfect Jinchuriki? Or was the 8 tails standing before him truly a master of vegetarianism and Buddhist practices, completely devoid of any negative emotions?" But whatever the reason, Uchiha Chi had little time to contemplate a countermeasure. At that moment, after deflecting a grenade and unleashing the 8-tailed beasts, the 8 tails had come to a halt. It raised its massive head, its round, emotionless eyes turning towards Uchiha Chi. Then, roar, the terrifying giant roared to the heavens. Blue-black spheres of concentrated chakra continuously coalesced around its mouth, forming a deep, inky black ball. Like a laser beam. Boom. The tailed beast ball shot out with a bang. It aimed directly at Uchiha Chi. Faced with this extreme and terrifying ninjutsu, Uchiha Chi's heart pounded wildly, nearly leaping out of his chest. The dream he'd had the night after leaving Konoha and arriving in the land of hot water had, at that moment, become a reality more real than ever. Unable to resist, Uchiha Chi had no room to prepare. In his final moments, he could only muster every defensive measure he could muster. Cursed seals, immortality, forbidden techniques, flesh transformation, fire style, chakra mode, everything he'd gained from the battle so far. Everything. He gripped the massive sword tightly in his hand, which instantly shone with light like the sun. Uchiha Chi gritted his teeth, suppressing the urge to tremble. He twisted his feet, lunged, and raised the hilt of his sword to his chest. With a roar, he thrust forward. The tailed beast ball crushed everything in its path, every blade, tree, mud, and stone, reduced to dust. It carved a gully several hundred meters long, slamming directly into the tip of an illusory, 40-meter-long, flaming sword thrust out horizontally. However, the tailed beast ball's momentum was only slightly reduced, and in an instant, it shattered and crushed the blade from the tip all the way, breaking the radiant sword into pieces. The expelled flame split into 4 streams, streaking from the surface of the tailed beast ball and spreading behind it, from the tip, to the blade, to the hilt, and finally to the hilt. It pushed forward all the way to the swordsman, and under Uchiha Chi's horrified gaze, it smashed into his face. Meanwhile, on the other side, looking at the distant battlefield that had become a ruin, sparks of fire drifted in the air, a dreamlike, magnificent sight. Sitting atop the tallest tree trunk, feeling the heat-laden wind brush against his face, Uchiha Madara, one hand propped on his knee, shook his head slightly as he gazed at Uchiha Chi, who had been blasted skyward by the tailed beast ball. Tisk, what a mess, brat. His gaze fell on the charred arm lying beside him. Through his Sharingan, he could clearly see the chaotic interweaving of various forbidden techniques and secret arts. Compared to Hashirama, this level of recovery is still far behind. However, he could be used as a pawn to pass the time in his spare time. We'll see. If he survives, I'll grant him some real power. Uchiha Madara narrowed his eyes slightly and chuckled. This brat, perhaps he can serve as a more effective backup, the one who will inherit my name, Uchiha Madara. Chapter 219. At the critical moment, the one-eyed man suppressed the 8-tailed beast. The blast launched by the tailed beast ball launched a massive blast 800 meters across. Earth, rocks, grass, stumps, sparks, everything within the ruins was torn apart, rising into the sky in incomprehensible parabolas. Only a monotonous humming echoed in his ears. Ning, everything seemed to have fallen silent, but the next instant, an extremely sharp sound surged into a single point, creating a cacophony of noise. Then, boom, detonating from its stagnant point, the heat wave instantly expanded into a dazzling sphere nearly 50 meters in diameter. Brilliant, pale, noisy, silent, all the adjectives remained there. Amidst the horrific light, Uchiha Chi's eyes widened as he watched his body being shattered, then forcibly reassembled by forbidden techniques and mystical arts. He wanted to give up, to die, but a will, brighter than anything, deep within his soul, stubbornly took over, forcing his body into desperate resistance. Talent, combat intuition, S+, activated. Heart-wrenching pain, a throbbing agony that made him want to slam his head into the nail board and crush himself, surged through every corner of his body. Those few tens of seconds, long yet fleeting, felt like centuries to Uchiha Chi. And when it all came to an end, Silence returned to the world. Bang! A creature, so horrific it was barely recognizable, plummeted from mid-air, crashing into the vast crater blasted out by the ruins, sending up a cloud of dust. But in a moment, the almost unrecognizable creature began to heal itself at a speed visible to the naked eye. Flesh reassembled, bones grew, and its charred skin peeled away the blood scabs, giving way to new, intact skin. After draining all of Zero Tail's chakra, and even his own, Uchiha Chi finally pulled himself up from the bottom of the pit, panting heavily. His body was now covered in burns, blood, and dust. His Konoha Enbu uniform had long since been reduced to ash by the onslaught. Only the one Ryoma Aburim had given him, with its exceptionally strong, heat-resistant mesh lining, remained, shredded to tatters. While it might have resembled a fishing net, its defensive capabilities were undeniable. Uchiha Chi, gripping the Kusanagi sword, chiseled the oval wall, then struggled to climb out of the pit. Looking around, he saw the once lush forest now reduced to a blazing wasteland. The mossy trees, the gurgling springs, the vibrant chirping of cicadas and frogs, the sweet aroma of grass and trees in the air, all now vanished. Not far ahead, the clanging of clangs mingled with the sound of ninjutsu flying by. Those were the Konoha members who had come with him on this trip. While Uchiha Chi was battling Killer Bee, they had also been locked in a bitter battle. Now, with a grim expression, they faced off against Kakuzu, who had split into 4 masked monsters and a single main body, with various ninjutsu ready to be unleashed. Further away, the towering figure of the Eight Tails, in its full form, stood amidst the sandy ruins created by the eight-tailed beasts. Watching this unfold, Uchiha Chi's eyes were filled with bewilderment. Why would Kakuzu and Killer Bee, 2 cage-level powerhouses with no connection at all, team up to attack him? Why couldn't the Zero Tails absorb the Eight Tails chakra? Why had the situation reached this point? Questions surrounded him, but at this moment, he had no time to ponder them. In the distance, the Eight Tails, having just unleashed a tailed beast ball, turned its head fiercely. Its pale, round eyes stared intently at the disheveled Uchiha Chi, who had crawled out of the pit. A sinister smile curled its lips. "You evil Uchiha brat, go to hell, roar!" The moonlit giant beast suddenly raised its head again. Within its mouth, another jet-black, deep-tailed beast ball rapidly took shape. Witnessing this scene, Uchiha Chi tightly gripped the Kusanagi sword, his heart pounding. Sweat began to drip from his palms. In his current state, resisting an attack of this magnitude was a pipe dream. However, this tailed beast ball would bury not only him but everyone here, too. His newly recruited younger brother Yamato, his shady superior Aburame Ryoma, and old Chen, who had taught him precious taijutsu. They would all die. At this thought, Uchiha Chi gritted his teeth and clenched his fists in hatred. This humiliating powerlessness. This powerlessness was more painful than a broken heart. This profound powerlessness. The inability to control one's own destiny. The tumagadama in his crimson eyes whirled rapidly around his pitch-black pupils. Intense emotions reverberated in his heart, then were devoured by the zero tail in his abdomen, transforming into a futile sliver of chakra. A sliver of chakra that couldn't even form a Rasengan. What should he do? What should he do? What could he do? With such a disparate power gap, with such distinct power systems, how could he resist this second-tailed beast ball, the death knell? Was everything going to end right here? And yet, at that moment, a deep, aged roar suddenly boomed from the distance. Fire style, great fire extinguishing. This voice, so familiar to Uchiha Chi, caused him to suddenly raise his head. At the end of his sight, a distant figure, seemingly ant-like in front of the Eight Tails, leaped into the air, brandishing a flaming sword. From mid-air, he formed a seal with one hand, raised his index finger, and blasted out a massive sea of fire from his throat, engulfing the eight-tailed ox killer's head. The eight-tailed ox killer was startled, and subconsciously raised his four-fingered palm and swung it fiercely. The gust of wind that stirred up from the giant palm instantly shattered the sea of fire. It suddenly raised its huge head and took a closer look. It saw an old man with long gray hair, a cold and unruly face, a single blood-red eye, and half a visor, brandishing a long sword. He pierced the sea of fire, tore through the gust of wind, and leaped towards it. Seeing the scarlet three-magatama Sharingan that stretched a long, blazing line across the night sky, the eight-tailed Gyuki subconsciously sensed something was amiss. It immediately averted its gaze, choosing not to meet the eye. Then, as it turned its gaze, it saw, in the old man's hand, a long sword, like that of the Uchiha Chi, streams of flame streaming down its blade. Its blade blazed like fire, reflecting a single, scarlet three-magatama Sharingan. At that moment, their gazes met over the blade. This eye power. How could it be bad? The eight-tailed Gyuki's expression suddenly changed drastically. At this moment, it was forcibly using its violet-tailed beast chakra to overwhelm Killer Bee's consciousness, possessing Killer Bee's body and performing its full-tailed beast transformation. Consequently, it lacked a human Juriki to help it break the illusion. Once caught in an illusion, it was in danger. With this thought, before losing consciousness, the eight-tailed Gyuki summoned the last of its conscious energy, shaking its spiritual world in an attempt to awaken Killer Bee. And below, seeing the old man charging at the eight-tail and instantly controlling it, Uchiha Chi's eyes lit up. That's the Great Elder. At that moment, leaping towards the eight-tail was none other than the Uchiha clan's last remaining Great Elder, Uchiha Setsuna. After meeting Setsuna's Sharingan, the eight-tailed Gyuki's gaze froze. As if being manipulated, he suddenly rose from the ground, lifting his body and swallowing the tailed beast ball that was about to burst forth. Instantly, the tailed beast ball exploded within the tailed beast, instantly propping up the Gyuki's body and blowing it up like a balloon. Pong, with a dull thud, the giant beast collapsed helplessly, crashing into the rubble, stirring up a huge dust storm. Uchiha Setsuna spun to the eight-tail's head, planted himself firmly, ignoring the explosion and gust of wind behind him, and slowly sheathed his blade. According to the ancestral records, after the tailed beast is fully transformed, the position of the Jinchuriki should be. He stared at the dazed beast before him with a cold gaze, his single eye narrowed slightly. After a moment of contemplation, his gaze settled on the eight-tailed Gyuki's brow. Here, with a single cry, a crescent-shaped blade flashed beneath the night sky. The eight-tailed Gyuki's brows suddenly opened to the sides, revealing the well-defined layers of flesh behind them, and the figure, eyes closed, protected by the tailed beast. Kirib? I see. No wonder this beast is so obedient, Uchiha Setsuna sneered. So it's gone berserk. Gazing at the unconscious Jinchuriki, he immediately stomped his foot on his chest. Raising his hand, he swung his sword, a streak of moonlight dancing in the night. With a flick of his hand, he grasped the hilt of his long sword and aimed the tip at Killer Bee's throat. Then, without hesitation, he thrust it down fiercely. However, at this moment, Killer Bee, already in a coma, suddenly woke up in his final struggle before the eight-tails was hypnotized. He abruptly opened his eyes. Chapter 220 Kokuzu suddenly realized something was wrong. The dust storm kicked up by the eight-tails fall obscured the view beyond. Uchiha Chi averted his gaze, still a hint of surprise in his eyes. Undoubtedly, only the Sharingan could reveal such an unsightly state to the tailed beasts. But he still couldn't understand how Uchiha Setsuna had done it. How had he managed to forcibly control the eight-tails with only a three-magatama Sharingan? Judging from the examples in the original story, even Sasuke, Obito, and Madara, whose main Gekyo Sharingan abilities weren't particularly prone to Genjutsu, could easily control the nine-tails. But at least it was still a main Gekyo. While the tailed beast's resistance to Genjutsu wasn't great, their chakra was truly plentiful. Uchiha Chi reasoned that controlling such a creature required at least two conditions. First, the immense power boost from the main Gekyo Sharingan. Second, a vast amount of chakra was required to maintain control of the tailed beasts. This conclusion is based on the difficulty of controlling the tailed beasts for different characters in the original work, especially the second point. For example, during the Nine Tails Rebellion, Obito released the Nine Tails, and Minato, as the fourth Hokage, realized at the time that the masked man controlling the tailed beasts also has risks, so the other party must want to end the battle quickly. Therefore, if Itachi, who was short of blue, were to control the Nine Tails, he would probably be exhausted after more than 10 minutes. If Obito were to do it, he could probably control it for more than the duration of the Nine Tails Rebellion. And Uchiha Madara, whose chakra volume was so large that he could arm wrestle with Hashirama Senju, could activate Susanoo while controlling the Nine Tails, howling Hashirama with full energy, and then fight with the first Hokage for 3 days and 3 nights. The only other example of someone with three Magatama still holding the upper hand against a tailed beast was Sasuke, dressed in white and possessing the Heaven's Curse seal. At Orochimaru's abandoned experimental base, he easily dissipated Naruto's Nine Tails chakra with a single glare. At that time, Sasuke, thanks to the Heaven's Curse seal, possessed a seemingly limitless supply of chakra, And this was despite Naruto having just fought Orochimaru and was already weakened. Uchiha Chi had a vague feeling that something might have happened to Uchiha Setsuna. At that moment, a series of startled shouts awoke him, bringing him back to consciousness. Damn it, quick, stop him, he's targeting Uchiha Chi. Uchiha Chi suddenly looked up and saw, amidst the battle group ahead, a familiar figure charging towards him. While he was battling Killer Bee, Konoha's three squads, led by Burame Shiguro, Sarutobi Shinosuke, and Hyuga Hisashi, encountered three elite ninja squads led by Kumagakure Ninja Rami. The two sides were already locked in a fierce battle. Konoha had deliberately assigned the Burame Ryoma and Sarutobi Shinosuke to contain the additional Kokuzu, but due to the disparity in strength, the fierce battle left both men in a difficult position, breathless and slightly bruised. At this moment, Kokuzu hadn't anticipated such a pleasant surprise. Kinjinsho had been hired by Tsunagakure Chiao to collaborate with Kumagakure ninjas to kill Uchiha Chi. However, this also meant that the bounty would be divided. Kokuzu had originally intended to take advantage of the conflict in Kumagakure and Konoha to capture the head of Sarutobi Shinosuke, the son of the Hokage, in exchange for the bounty, which would have somewhat offset his losses. However, both Sarutobi Shinosuke and Burame Ryoma were not easy to defeat. Although he had the upper hand with their combined strength, it would still take him quite some time to kill them. And now, the main target of this mission had suddenly been blasted right in front of him by the tailed beast ball, and the opponent was so seriously injured that he could barely walk. For Kokuzu, this was a godsend. What kind of Sarutobi Shinosuke? How could he be worth anything compared to this brat's head? With this thought in mind, Kokuzu actually broke free from the two men and headed straight for Uchiha Chi, who was being blasted by the tailed beast ball. In an instant, he rushed to Uchiha Chi. Gazing at the fat sheep about to be crushed, Kokuzu's lips curled up, and he shouted excitedly, "Poor brat, I'll take your head." As he reached him, he suddenly raised his palm, fingers splayed like golden scissors, and slashed at Uchiha Chi's throat. This hand strike, combined with the earth-style, earth spear, was as sharp as a blade. A single strike would have cleaved Uchiha Chi's head. Faced with Kokuzu's sneak attack, Uchiha Chi's brows furrowed. He instinctively opened his Sharingan, his two Magatama rotating, attempting to cast a Jinjutsu to delay him. However, the blow came too fast. Uchiha Chi's body was already at its limit, lacking the chakra to even activate the Jinjutsu. A wave of wind pierced his face, and a cold, fierce, inhuman hand suddenly tore through him. Uchiha Chi's eyes suddenly widened. But just as he thought his head would be severed by that blow, and then carried off to the woods by Kokuzu to be crushed to pieces, Kokuzu's hand suddenly froze, motionless just 0.01 centimeters from his neck. Uchiha Chi swallowed hard, his still undeveloped Adam's apple trembling as it touched the lifeless hand. The illusion worked. He breathed a sigh of relief, quickly pulling his neck away from the hand. Just as he was about to step back, a serious voice suddenly echoed from behind his ear, answering Uchiha Chi's muttered question. "No, illusions have limited effect on this guy." As the voice sank, 20 pairs of crimson Sharingans suddenly lit up in the deep night. A rustling sound. Hearing those familiar words and the sound of robes flying, Uchiha Chi instinctively turned his head and saw 20 figures leaped from the darkness, their 3 Magatama Sharingan eyes strikingly visible. Each one wore a dark, high-collared robe bearing the Uchiha clan crest, and a gray leather belt around their waist, as shown in the picture below. Uchiha Chi's eyes widened slightly, and upon seeing the newcomers, a smile broke across his face. Before him, rushing to the aid of the Uchiha clan's experts, was none other than the long-lost Uchiha Chiichiro. "See, let's talk about old times later. This must be the bounty hunter who attacked you in the land of hot springs, right?" Uchiha Chiichiro's eyes darkened as he glared at Kokuzu, who had escaped the Jinjutsu and was now surrounded by the Uchiha. "How could you be so cruel to a 12-year-old? Are you bullying us, Uchiha?" Hanzon's words trailed off as 20 pairs of Sharingans converged on him. The air around him seemed frozen in place. Kokuzu, who had just used his clone heart to break the Jinjutsu and barely had time to breathe a sigh of relief, suddenly felt his smile falter. He glanced nervously at the Uchiha who had blocked all possible escape routes. His heart skipped a beat, and he suddenly realized something was amiss. Chapter 221 What? He is actually the young leader of the Uchiha clan? Never mind Kokuzu's shock at the sight of 23 Magatama Uchiha. Even Uchiha Chi was stunned. These weren't just cabbages growing in the fields, These were 23 Magatama Sharingan Uchiha. Each 3 Magatama represented an elite genin. This group could easily compete with smaller nations outside the 5 major powers in a match 3 match. Even considering the garrison of Hell Valley alone, it's impossible to have such a splendid lineup. So where did Seiichiro pull all these people from? And why were they even here? Then, you're not going to talk, Seiichiro glared at Kakuzu and said coldly, then die. With that, all 20 Uchiha stepped forward, some drawing their swords, some forming hand seals. In the darkness, a sea of crimson pupils lit up, and the air around them instantly plummeted to freezing point. Wait, Kakuzu looked around, his heart skipping a beat again. His scalp tingled and he quickly raised his hand. This is a misunderstanding. I'm just passing by. Seiichiro stared at Kakuzu, who was trying to delay time, sneered and shook his head. The underground gold exchange offices in the 3 countries of Kusa, and beyond have been massacred, including the 16 bounty hunters who rushed here, as well as the senior executives who set up the gold exchange offices, the unscrupulous businessmen, and the male ninjas. It seems that you still don't understand what a stupid thing you are doing, even for an S-rank traitor like you. Seiichiro's eyes were as cold as a piece of ice. He raised his hand coldly and shouted in a cold voice, since you have the courage to accept the task of placing a bounty on the head of the young patriarch of my Uchiha clan, then you must have been mentally prepared to bear the wrath of the strongest clan in the ninja world. Hearing this, Kakuzu's dark green eyes suddenly shrank, and he looked at Uchiha Chi beside Seiichiro in disbelief. What did you say? This poor? He's the Uchiha clan's young chief. Kakuzu's impassive face couldn't help but twitch. This wasn't even mentioned in the mission information. Even now, he still vividly remembered the passbook Uchiha Chi had tossed out to tease the 70-year-old comrade, a paltry 3-digit sum. Now, he was being told that this poor kid, whose pockets were paler than his face, was the Uchiha clan's young chief? Are you kidding me? Uchiha Chi blinked, looking at Seiichiro with a look of sudden realization. It seemed like he did have this status, but he had never had a clear understanding of it. If anything, it was that the clan's treasury was quite intimidating. It wasn't until this moment that Uchiha Chi truly grasped the terrifying power this status represented. Seiichiro, I'm not here for this, Uchiha Chi was about to explain. In his mind, wasn't the clan chief supposed to be the one leading the charge? Why is he being protected now? Okay, see, you don't have to worry. Kingailang tilted his head, the coldness on his face eased a little, and he patted Uchiha Chi's shoulder gently, smiling. After receiving the information that the underground gold exchange had offered a reward for you, I immediately informed the Great Elder and Captain Fugaku of the news, but you had already left the village at that time, and there was no time to stop you. These 20 clansmen were urgently transferred from the clan, Hell Valley, and Tangayan City. More clansmen have already taken action. Don't worry. This matter will not end so easily. Everyone involved in this matter, Kingailang glanced at Kakuzu coldly, and said in a cold voice, word by word, everyone will pay the price. Hearing this, looking at the elite Uchiha clan members who were getting closer and closer, and the pairs of distinctive 3 Magatama, Kakuzu suddenly took 2 steps back nervously, and couldn't help but sweating profusely. The arrival of the Uchiha ninjas drastically altered the situation on the battlefield. Meanwhile, upon witnessing the arrival of the Uchiha ninjas, the experienced and seasoned Jonin of Kumagakure, Lamy, instantly sensed something was amiss. Fortunately, the Uchiha had their sights on Kakuzu, who had broken free from their formation. Seizing this opportunity, Lamy and his elite Kumagakure troops slowed their advance, gradually distancing themselves from the Konoha force. At that moment, a streak of lightning suddenly blazed from the night sky. A scroll, delivered by the Heaven Sentence technique, appeared before Lamy. He immediately unfolded it and read the information contained within. After seeing the information written in it, Ray Midai's face changed immediately. The Kumagakure ninja beside him couldn't help but look stern when he saw this, and immediately asked, Senior Ray Midai, what happened? Why are there so many people from the Uchiha clan, with this number? Without waiting for the Kumagakure ninja to finish his words, Ray Midai's face turned stern, and he immediately ordered, My boy, you take your men to retreat immediately. I will notify Kirabi that the mission has been completed. The village requires us to return to the team immediately. After making this decision, Ray Midai's face relaxed, patted Otoy on the shoulder, exhaled deeply, and said, The situation in Hell Valley is no longer something we can interfere with. I understand. Hearing this, Otoy, who had a square green facial pattern on the bridge of his nose, breathed a sigh of relief, and then instructed, "Then I'll trouble you with Killer B, Sr." He and Killer B were good friends, but he wasn't particularly strong. He was merely a sensory ninja accompanying the team, providing support during the battle. Between battles, he kept an eye on the situation on the other side. It seemed something unusual had occurred on Killer B's side. Rami nodded. "Don't worry. We've already agreed on a countermeasure with Killer B before we arrived. Tell him to retreat immediately." With that, he immediately pulled a projectile from his ninja tool bag and hurled it into the air. Bang! A conspicuous plume of bright yellow smoke erupted from the night sky. Elsewhere, with a fierce flash of blade light, Uchiha Setsuna's blade stabbed down mercilessly. Killer B, having just regained consciousness, saw this scene, his pupils constricting, and he immediately raised his hand to block. Puff, hiss, the blade instantly pierced Killer B's palm, causing him to groan in pain. Uchiha Setsuna's gaze grew cold, and he immediately drew his blade, striking Killer B's vitals once more. This fellow's swordsmanship, Killer B's scalp tingled. Enduring the pain, he partially transformed into a tailed beast, creating 3 tentacles. He pushed back the opponent's foot on his chest and rolled over. However, a zigzagging blade, like a thorn in his flesh, instantly severed the 3 tentacles and sliced horizontally towards his neck. Killer B slipped and ducked his head, narrowly avoiding the blow. Unlike the Uchiha Chi he had just engaged, this old man's swordsmanship was sophisticated and fierce, leaving him no chance to breathe. Furthermore, his 7 blades had already been melted by Uchiha Chi, and the 8 tails within him was once again trapped in a genjutsu. For a moment, Killer B had no countermeasures and could only dodge while trying to communicate with the 8 tails and dispel the genjutsu. After 4 cuts on his body, Killer B paused. He had finally re-established contact with the 8 tails. Without hesitation, Killer B activated his half-beast transformation, coating his body with a dark red-tailed beast garment and a sea of white bones. His pale, round eyes instantly locked onto the old man before him. Yet, for some reason, despite being clad in the tailed beast garment, which possessed powerful defensive capabilities, Killer B felt a strange sense of dread facing this old man. Upon witnessing this, Uchiha Setsuna narrowed his single eye and paused. Fear didn't show in his eyes, but silently, the 3 Magatama Sharingan in his crimson eye rapidly rotated. As the 2 sides faced each other, the air seemed to grow increasingly tense. The next moment, a streak of lightning suddenly blazed from the distant night sky, followed shortly by another burst of bright yellow smoke. Seeing the smoke bomb, Killer B, about to launch his attack, paused, startled. That's a signal to retreat immediately. Without waiting to understand why his side, despite having such a huge advantage, would choose to retreat, Killer B, without hesitation, immediately turned and decisively retreated towards the northern part of the land of hot water. Just as Killer B had left, a group of dark figures leaped over. They were the elite Uchiha soldiers and Konoha ninjas who had quickly tied up Kokuzu and rushed to his aid. Grand Elder, Uchiha Ichiro took 2 steps forward and asked anxiously, "Are you alright?" Uchiha Setsuna silently turned his head, his single crimson eye scanning the group behind him. Seeing that the brat who had once again made such a mess of himself was still alive, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and his tense nerves finally relaxed. Then he raised his brows, snorted coldly, and his eyes fell on Uchiha Chi, who dared not speak at this moment. HMPH, what can happen to me? Let's go back to Hell Valley. And you, Uchiha Chi, why are you lowering your head and pretending to be a quail? Do you think I can see you? Come here. Hearing this, Uchiha Chi, who was hiding in the crowd with his head shrank, not knowing how to face this old man for a moment, suddenly trembled all over. Chapter 222, The Narrow Space, The Time to Hell. Ever since Uchiha Chi left the village, information about his whereabouts had been leaked by Sand Village spies within Konoha. Then, Chiyo, an elder of Sand Village, infiltrated the underground gold exchange and disclosed his information, attracting the attention of Kumagakure and various bounty hunters. This culminated in the Kumagakure and gold exchange collusion to attack Uchiha Chi. Before this, everything was sold in the underground black market between countries, even bloodline limits were used as bargaining chips. However, the Sharingan was the only thing no one dared to trade openly. Now, even the head of their own young clan leader was placed on a bounty, and he was actually attacked by an operation organized by the gold exchange. Death on the battlefield, at the hands of other ninja, is completely different from death in an operation orchestrated by the gold exchange. That's why the Uchiha clan was so furious after learning about this. With the unprecedented consensus of Uchiha Setsuna and Uchiha Fugaku, they urgently mobilized elite ninjas from the village, Hell Valley, and the land of hot springs to rush to the aid of Uchiha Chi. In addition, they sent family ninjas to massacre the gold exchange offices in the surrounding small countries, and all the people involved in the incident were implicated. See, remember, this is a necessary measure. Seiichiro recounted the entire incident, solemnly reminding Uchiha Chi beside him, the Uchiha clan is different from the Hyuga clan. We don't have the constraints of a caged bird or the hierarchy of main and branch families. We are united by blood ties, and every member of the clan is a family in the true sense. The strong protect the weak. Clan members who can open the Sharingan must shoulder the responsibility of protecting those who don't. This blood relationship, this bloodline, is the most important thing that connects us in this absurd and dark world. It is the bottom line that must not be crossed. Anyone who touches this bottom line will be killed, even if it means destroying their family and clan. No one will be spared. Uchiha Seiichiro stared at Uchiha Chi beside him, his tone heavy. This is not a joke. Walking with the team through the wilderness of the land of hot springs, lying on the ox cart, Uchiha Chi nodded and responded in the same solemn tone. I remember. Seiichiro smiled, raised his head, and gazed forward, a wave of emotion welling up in his heart. In the past, with his pessimistic view of the ninja world, participating in such an operation would have only led him to lament the oversensitivity of the clan leader and elders, perhaps even a touch of jealousy. Why was he sent on a battlefield where his life was almost certain to end, while the clan simply watched indifferently? And yet, when that brat, Uchiha Chi, was targeted, almost the entire clan was mobilized, slaughtering countless nations in a bloodbath? For a ninja, death is death, no matter where it occurs. What special meaning does death hold? But now, as one who had been saved, as one who had once been loved, taking the initiative to lead such an operation, he gradually understood the meaning of the clan's existence, and he readily shared this understanding with Uchiha Chi. Of course, Seiichiro felt he might have gone too far. After all, based on what he knew of Uchiha Chi's personality and actions, he knew the brat would do even more extreme things than he did. Hell Valley is just ahead. It's almost time to say goodbye. I still have to carry out the killing order and lead the team to hunt down several high-ranking officials of the gold exchange who have fled to a small country. Seiichiro paused, glancing at the head of the group, where the great elder Uchiha Setsuna sat cross-legged in the carriage, his sword resting between his legs, eyes closed. By the way, have you figured out how to tell the great elder? Hearing Seiichiro's words, Uchiha Chi's face suddenly turned bitter. How should I say it? The last time Uchiha Setsuna had asked him to come over to see him, his body had collapsed to its limit, causing him to faint, thus avoiding that meeting. He had only just regained consciousness and learned the entire story from Seiichiro. After learning everything, his heart, far from feeling relieved, felt even heavier. And now, he has no idea how to face this old man. When he was at his weakest, it was this old man who risked half his life to save him from certain death. After that, he was like an old grandfather in a fantasy novel, giving him all kinds of things as if they were free, including equipment, forbidden techniques, swordsmanship, money, and even the position of clan leader. Especially the Uchiha style, Halo dance and Uchiha style, silk shuriken manipulation technique, which were passed down from this old man. These two techniques constitute the most core abilities he has possessed in his battles so far, allowing him to go from having nothing to defeating countless powerful enemies. It can be said that from the very beginning, he was branded with the Uchiha seal, which is also the source of all stories. The elder's words are indeed hurtful. King Gailang smiled bitterly and comforted him, but he won't eat you. Some things must be faced after all. Uchiha Chi raised his head and was silent for a moment. He looked up at the flowing clouds in the sky, watching the octagonal sunlight penetrate the clouds and fall on his chest, burning his skin, and his heartbeat increased and decreased with each beat. Yes, we have to face it, Seiichiro nodded, then grabbed Uchiha Chi's arm from the cart and lifted him behind his back. There's no time to lose, let's face it now. Uchiha Chi froze, then immediately struggled. Hey, wait, no, what are you doing? Let me down. But how could his now drained body compare to Seiichiro, now a jonin? Seiichiro chuckled, carrying Uchiha Chi on his shoulders and trotting forward. Do you think I'm idle, just waiting for you to wake up? Forgive me, see, this is just the great elder's job, bang. With those words, Uchiha Chi flew into a beautiful arc and was thrown into the tarpaulin-draped carriage. His face hit the wooden board, knocking over 2 earthenware jars filled with corn, and slamming head-on into something solid. PFFT, shaking his head, he scrambled to his feet, shaking off a cloud of corn that had knocked over his forehead. The Uchiha realized he'd bumped into Kokuzu, whose mask had been torn off, his mouth bound with sackcloth, and he was bound and tied up. His body was engraved with simple seals that would break with a single struggle. Ugh! Kokuzu glared at him the moment he saw him, his posture almost ready to curse. His intense emotion caused a surge of chakra within the Uchiha. Uchiha couldn't help but raise an eyebrow, almost amused by the other's gesture. Uchiha weren't skilled in sealing techniques, and the one placed on Kokuzu was like a mere decoration. He could break free at any moment. What truly calmed him down was the elite Uchiha warriors surrounding the carriage. While his masks could dispel illusions, they were no match for the multiple Sharingan eyes. If he harbored any dissenting thoughts, he would be instantly mesmerized by the various Sharingan techniques. Furthermore, he was personally guarded by the strongest man here, Uchiha Setsuna. At this thought, Uchiha-C's smile froze. Then, a calm, ethereal, elderly voice called out, "See, you're here." Uchiha-C looked up to see Uchiha Setsuna, sitting cross-legged in front of the carriage. He tilted his head and stared at him with his single eye. "What? Are you afraid I'll eat you?" No. Uchiha-C chuckled dryly, scratched his head, and slowly shuffled over to him on the floor. Sitting beside Uchiha Setsuna, Uchiha-C realized that the old man actually had both eyes open. While his left eye was still functioning, the pupil of his right had turned a pale white. This was a mark left by his enemy. "Then let me tell you first," Uchiha Setsuna frowned, glanced over, and said with great disgust, "What's the matter with your swordsmanship?" Hearing this question, Uchiha-C perked up and immediately explained, "Are you talking about the swordsmanship I developed? It's like this, I incorporated wind attribute ninjutsu, fire escape chakra mode, and..." Uchiha Setsuna raised his hand and interrupted with a frown, "Who asked you to say this? What I'm asking is, who taught you to use this swordsmanship like this?" The old man glanced at Uchiha-C, whose smile was frozen on his face, with disgust, and commented mercilessly, "Ugly. Stiff. Disgusting. Not Uchiha at all. Even a dog can perform better than you. Do you know what skills are? Do you know what swordsmanship is? If the foundation is not solid, victory or defeat will be decided in an instant. You need special training." "Special training?" The old man showed no mercy and scolded him. "Also, thanks to Shinichi's letter, I already know that you've been skipping classes and slacking off on your training in the land of rain. This time, I'll personally watch over you. I'll make sure you go through a hellish special training session." Chapter 223 Arriving at Hell Valley, the name of the leader. The land of hot springs is located in an area of hyperthermal volcanic activity, rich in hot springs and mountainous terrain. The largest volcanic crater remnant in this land is Hell Valley. This strangely shaped valley, formed by lava from the eruption, erupts. Volcanic gases belch from the grayish-yellow rock surface, filling the air with a strong odor of sulfur. Blowholes in the rock face emit a roaring plume of white mist as you pass by, creating the illusion of being in a fiery hell. Smaller, unnamed water holes trickle with a mournful, weeping sound, like a cry from beneath the earth. The convoy entered the narrow path that runs through Hell Valley, quickly passing through a barren sandy beach, avoiding the thick miasma, and arriving at a virgin forest that had been cleared and trimmed. The area was dominated by water sedge and 9-leaved bamboo, interspersed with various broadleaf trees. Within this forest lay their destination, the Uchiha clan's garrison camp, established on the cliffs surrounding Hell Valley. The convoy stopped in front of a row of newly built wooden houses. Uchiha Setsuna and Uchiha-C, who was almost autistic because of being scolded all the way, jumped off the carriage and walked to the front of the ninjas from Konoha who came to support. He said with a stern face, "Thank you all for coming to support Hell Valley. All tasks will be issued to you soon, and someone will take you to familiarize yourself with the terrain here. The main tasks are to patrol the cliffs and kill the members of the Blood Pond clan who crawled out of Hell Valley after going crazy. Please note that those of you who don't have Sharingan need to work in groups of at least 2 to perform daily tasks. Otherwise, stay in the camp and don't go anywhere. Also, don't walk into the camp with wounds, even if it's just a scratch from a branch. That's all." Uchiha Setsuna has always been decisive and efficient. After explaining the things he thought should be paid attention to, he turned around and left with his hands behind his back. Before leaving, he turned his head and said to Uchiha Chi, who was standing obediently before him, "After dinner, come see me, it's time to let you know something." With that, the group of Uchiha left with a bound Kokuzu, leaving behind Uchiha Chi and the other ninjas from Konoha. Because the old man's instructions were so concise, the group was still a little confused. 2 people in a group? No injuries. Sarutobi Shinizuke frowned in confusion. Hyuga Hisashi, who had been silent all the time in the team, opened his mouth to explain at this time. "I know some information about this. According to the records of my Hyuga clan in the Warring States period, the Blood Pond clan possesses a bloodline limit that is also a Taijutsu bloodline, Blood Dragon Eye. This Taijutsu bloodline has the ability of hypnotic eyes that is not inferior to the Sharingan. Facing such a bloodline ninja is like facing an Uchiha, and everyone present should also understand how tricky it is to face an enemy with this kind of illusion ability in a one-on-one situation." Hearing this, all the Konoha ninjas were slightly stunned. There has always been a saying in the ninja world that if you meet an Uchiha, you must run away in a one-on-one situation, and now what they are about to face is a hypnotic eye that can rival the Sharingan. No wonder Konoha would send their elite ninjas to come to the rescue. Such an enemy should not be underestimated. "Sir Hisashi, what's the reason for the wound?" Hyuga Kenji couldn't help but ask in Hyuga's daily team. As a branch family, his status with Hisashi is different. With his status, he can't access such secrets, so he asked this question. Hinata Hisashi paused, brow furrowed, and said, "Because of the age, the records on this matter are somewhat vague. The Blood Dragon Eye seems to be able to use blood as a medium to unleash a variety of unique ninjutsu. But what exactly these jutsu are, only the Uchiha clan, who have long been responsible for guarding the Blood Pond, know." Hearing this, everyone's eyes turned to Uchiha Chi, who stood nearby. Sarutobi Shinizuke stepped forward and asked earnestly, "Since Elder Setsuna says so, there must be a reason, but we don't quite understand the intricacies of this." "Uchiha Chi, do you know anything?" Uchiha Chi shook his head decisively. "Sorry, I don't know much." Having read the original novel, he knew what the old man Uchiha Setsuna was talking about. The Blood Dragon Eye possessed the ability to create a human bomb. After hypnotizing the enemy with a pupil technique, the Blood Dragon Eye could inject chakra into the victim through the wound, manipulating their blood and transforming them into a human bomb, which could then be detonated at a fixed time. The skilled illusionists within this clan conceal their presence. After hypnotizing someone, they inject chakra through hidden wounds to create a bomb, detonating when the victim blends into a crowd, causing massive damage. Perhaps for this reason, Uchiha Setsuna, who is well aware of this, mentioned examining the wound. The principle behind this is similar to the illusion technique of the here is not here technique. Sometimes, a victim of an illusion might mistake a simple scratch from a branch, unaware that the wound was inflicted by a hypnotized member of the Blood Pond clan. While Uchiha Chi knew this information, he lacked a reliable source. A single or 2 instances would be fine, but he couldn't simply pin everything on Orochimaru. Only Uchiha Chi knew the information within his head, a precious treasure to the people of this world. If it were revealed, it would surely attract scrutiny. Right now, Orochimaru coveted his body, but if he knew that his head held all sorts of information about the future, he might covet more than just his body. Uchiha Chi understood the principle that the innocent man is guilty of possessing a treasure. This, Sarutobi Shinizuke rubbed his forehead, sighing with a slight headache, and said, "We're all tired after all this travel. Let's rest for a while. See, it seems Elder Setsuna will be looking for you after dinner tonight. Please ask Elder Setsuna about this matter then." Uchiha Chi nodded, "No problem." After last night's fierce battle and the subsequent non-stop journey to Hell Valley, everyone was exhausted. There were 4 wooden houses in total. After each team selected one, they packed their belongings and moved in. The garrison in Hell Valley was a long-term mission, which meant that everyone had to hold it until Kumagakure completely abandoned their plans for Hell Valley. And at this moment, the Frost Country. Exiting the Cloud Thunder Gorge in the Land of Lightning, they trekked through a coastal wasteland, the same coastal area where the Allied forces had fought against the White Zetsu's army during the Fourth Shinobi World War. Here, the vanguard of the Hidden Cloud Village was stationed. Meanwhile, having crossed the northern part of the Land of Hot Water, detoured from the Land of Fields to the Land of Frost, the Hidden Cloud Village troop, having just returned to camp, was reporting the previous night's intelligence to Ai, the Hokage's son, who now commanded the vanguard. In the tent, Hearing the intelligence reports from everyone and seeing Killer B's horrific burns and slashes, young AI couldn't help but frown. How could a 12-year-old brat push B to this point? Unique swordsmanship, massive, powerful fire escape techniques, and a technique that seems to be able to send the Eight-Tails into a state of panic. Young AI pondered for a moment, then frowned and let out a deep breath. It doesn't matter, as long as B and I work together, killing this brat won't be a problem, and it's better to do it sooner rather than later. Having experienced a period of rapid growth in strength, AI knew that a 12-year-old boy could change with each passing day. Especially one who had activated the Sharingan, able to copy both taijutsu and ninjutsu, improving rapidly. Who knew how much stronger he would be the next time they met? The yellow flash of light in Konoha was already enough to give people a headache. He immediately spoke to the brown-skinned Lolita staffer in front of him who was wearing glasses. Mabu-ai, according to the coordinates I gave you, use the Heaven Sentence technique to contact the Blood Pond clan in Hell Valley immediately and ask them to cooperate with us in the operation. Within 3 days, I will chop off this brat's head. However, Mabu-ai, the brown-skinned, white-haired Lolita with the glasses, pushed his glasses, shook his head and said calmly, "No. Lord AI, the daimyo has sent news from the capital of the Land of Lightning that an assassin group called the Immortal Evildoers has infiltrated the daimyo's mansion. Lord Hokage has specifically ordered you to go to the capital immediately and capture the assassins. This concerns the whereabouts of our military funds for the upcoming Third Shinobi World War. The operation in Hell Valley will be taken over by others." Upon hearing this, the young man AI was stunned. Immortal Evildoers? What kind of organization is that? Mabu-ai looked at the documents in his hands and frowned slightly. Well, this is indeed strange, because the leader of this organization has the same name as the genius from Konoha village you want to kill. My name is Uchiha Chi. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 224, Mangekyo Sharingan. The Gap Between Fantasy and Reality. After enjoying a dinner cooked with Hell Valley's unique steam, Uchiha Chi, guided by a gentle-looking middle-aged man named Uchiha Huagwang, left the camp. Climbing the steep slope to the cliffs surrounding Hell Valley, he encountered Uchiha Setsuna, who had been waiting there for a while. Dressed in a short-collared kimono, his long graying hair tied back in a midsection, he sat silently cross-legged on the cliff's edge. He gazed down at Hell Valley, where swirling clouds and mist billowed in the night, a bottomless, shrouded landscape where no trace of human life could be found. "Great Elder, I'm here." Uchiha Chi approached and glanced down. A bird flew past the cliff edge. The next moment, a sudden, dark shadow shot out from Hell Valley, piercing the bird's body with swift speed and knocking it down. A closer look revealed the shadow to be an ordinary stone. Looking at this scene, Uchiha Chi was slightly surprised. Judging from the speed of the stone flying up and the sound when it was launched, the height difference of this Hell Valley was at least 800 meters. Being able to hide a flying bird in the air from such a long distance required a throwing technique that was not something that ordinary throwing techniques could achieve. Uchiha Setsuna, who was sitting cross-legged on the edge of the cliff, didn't even raise his eyebrows. He was silent for a moment before he spoke. "This is how people trapped in Hell Valley live. They suffered unjustifiable crimes and were imprisoned by the daimyo of the Land of Lightning on trumped-up charges. They survive by drinking the scalding water in the valley, catching birds in the sky, making clothes out of their feathers, and eating wild grass. They are just like savages, and who would have thought that 60 years ago, these people were still nobles with luxurious clothes and food?" Uchiha Setsuna paused, and without turning his head, he asked slowly, "See, can you understand what led to such a tragedy?" Uchiha Chi was silent for a moment, and replied, "This is probably the twists of fate. They gave up their power, gave up their identity as ninjas, and gave up the skills passed down by their clan for thousands of years. They chose to become nobles, chose to enter fields they were not good at, and chose to join the arena of another party's power, and ultimately suffered a crushing defeat." Hearing C's answer, Uchiha Setsuna nodded with satisfaction. "That's right, this is why I chose you instead of Fugaku." Uchiha Setsuna waved his hand, motioning Uchiha Chi to come to his side. If he took a step forward, he would fall into the bottom of the Hell Valley. He sat down on the edge of the cliff where he was smashed into pieces, with his feet hanging in the air. He looked at the bright full moon in the sky, the drifting mist, and listened to the sobs of hell resounding in the valley. He was silent for a moment, then sighed and said, Uchiha Fugaku undoubtedly possesses strength, strategy and ambition that ordinary Uchiha clan members cannot achieve. I even feel that he will one day awaken those forbidden eyes and obtain the kind of divine power that transcends everything and is difficult for mortals to achieve. According to common sense, I should support such a person to become the head of the family. Uchiha Setsuna paused and said silently, however, Fugaku lacks only one thing, that is, courage, since becoming the chief of the police force. This man has shouldered the trust of countless clansmen, which has led him to be cautious in every step he takes, and has forced him to work in vain for a distant goal. It has led to him gradually losing himself. Uchiha Setsuna looked coldly at the white mist swirling in the Hell Valley below, and said dimly, it is precisely because I have seen it that I am afraid. I am afraid that Fugaku will abandon the meaning of the Uchiha clan's existence like this pool of blood, and bring the Uchiha clan to this irreparable situation. Uchiha C frowned slightly, turned his head to look at the old man beside him, and asked in some confusion, what is the meaning of the Uchiha clan's existence? What is that? Uchiha Setsuna turned his head, and his single scarlet eye looked over dimly. The pursuit of power. This is the meaning of the Uchiha clan's existence. These eyes that can see through everything and learn everything have already planned the path we should take. Listen, Uchiha C, I want to tell you some unknown secrets. Only someone like me, who has wielded the forbidden technique of Izanagi, glimpsed the mystical world where fantasy and reality meet, and discern the truth of this world's past, can glimpse this hidden legend. Uchiha C was stunned for a moment. It wasn't the old man's charlatan rhetoric that spilled from his lips, but rather the moment Uchiha Setsuna's crimson three-magatama Sharingan suddenly lit up. At that moment, a miraculous transformation was quietly occurring. The three-magatama rapidly spun and stretched within the crimson eye, forming a completely new pattern. A pitch-black curve spiraled to the pupil, with three broad black lines encircling it, resembling a pattern formed by twisting camera film. Like the most perfect work of art in the world, a Mangekyo Sharingan. What is this? Uchiha C's breath caught, staring in disbelief at the eye pattern within Uchiha Setsuna's single crimson eye. This is the ultimate power the Uchiha have pursued for thousands of years. Uchiha Setsuna sighed softly, then smiled with relief. Mangekyo Sharingan. Uchiha C swallowed hard, feeling a rush of madness. He'd arranged for the old man to defraud his insurance, and now he'd actually let him use his Mangekyo? The absurdity of the moment left him frozen in place. Uchiha Setsuna had barely illuminated his Mangekyo Sharingan when he immediately covered his eyes and uttered a painful groan. Tears of blood streamed down his palm, scattering into the night sky. He seized this fleeting moment, struggling to raise a blood-stained finger. With trembling hands, he brought his index and middle fingers together and touched them to Uchiha C's wide-open right eye. With his other hand, he formed the way seal. Then, Uchiha C heard the old man before him roar, transfer seal. Seal. A slight warmth welled up in his eye sockets, as if a special power were infused into his right eye. A sudden tingling sensation spread throughout his eyeball, causing Uchiha C to unconsciously open his Sharingan. Reflected within the two Magatama-capable Sharingan, his right eye silently transformed into the form of Uchiha Setsuna's Mangekyo. But the next moment, as if nothing had happened, the pattern vanished silently. Having done all this, Uchiha Setsuna immediately deactivated his Sharingan, as if the experience had been immensely draining. The old man gasped, his mouth opening and closing. No, old man, you. Uchiha C nervously supported him, fearing he might accidentally fall off the cliff. As he leaped to his feet, he dragged Uchiha Setsuna to a safer spot, where he lay dead. After a long gasp, Uchiha Setsuna, nearly dying on the spot, barely managed to recover. He was silent for a moment, a slightly dazed look in his eyes. He raised his head and stared at Uchiha C, asking, just now, where did I say I was coming from? Uchiha C was startled, then saw the old man's eyes light up, as if remembering something. His Mangekyo Sharingan shone once more, and he raised a finger to poke it into his eyes. By the way, I'm going to place the transcription seal on you. Wait a minute, Uchiha C's scalp tingled, wondering if this old man had Alzheimer's? How could he forget everything he had just done? He quickly slapped away Uchiha Setsuna's trembling raised hand and interrupted, you've already done it, once, that's enough, really. The old man finally came to his senses, nodded, and took out a small notebook from his pocket and glanced at it. Then he coughed twice and said heavily, one more thing, I must warn you, Izanagi is not a good technique. The gap between fantasy and reality is extremely dangerous, forbidden technique, never abuse it. Chapter 225, A Fantasy Journey, a heavy gift beyond imagination. That day, before I used the Halo dance in fire style, chakra mode, I used the forbidden technique passed down through generations in my clan, Izanagi. To activate this forbidden technique, one needs to form the 3 seals of Rabbit Highway. The holder of the Sharingan will pay the price of permanent blindness in one eye to reverse everything, make things that are disadvantageous to oneself for a period of time never happen, and only choose to make things that are beneficial to oneself a reality. Uchiha Setsuna raised himself up and sat weakly on the edge of the cliff where the night breeze flowed quietly. He slowly told this story that Uchiha Chi did not know before the two parted in the land of hot water. At that time, I was not sure whether this technique could be successfully activated. So, with the intention of dying, I pursued that moment of eternity. In the end, everything was burned out in exchange for a brief period of unmatched power. Fortunately, the forbidden technique was successful. At the cost of permanent blindness in one eye, I entered the gap between fantasy and reality, and it was at this juncture that I, having finally grasped the principle of the eternity of the moment at the age of 60, awakened my Mangekyo Sharingan. I obtained a Mangekyo technique called Aim no Tsuniki. Aim no Tsuniki. Hearing this word, Uchiha Chi was startled. According to Sakura mythology, Aim no Tsuniki is the deity who governs time, and the eye technique of the same name is inevitably related to time-related abilities. It makes sense that Uchiha Setsuna would sacrifice himself in pursuit of the eternity of the moment, thus awakening this type of Mangekyo technique. However, what form would time, a dimension that exists only in the human senses, take when transformed into an eye technique? Yes, it's called the Tenno Eternal Mangekyo Dojutsu. Uchiha Setsuna nodded, but a slight embarrassment soon crossed the old man's face. But to be honest, I only remember the name. I've forgotten the effects of this Dojutsu and how to activate it. Oh, this, Uchiha Chi couldn't help but be dumbfounded. He could forget a Mangekyo Dojutsu that automatically knew its purpose upon awakening? He sighed at the thought. He knew it wasn't something Uchiha Setsuna was deliberately hiding or genuinely suffering from Alzheimer's. After all, despite his age, the energy with which he was beheading people and placing bounties on their heads, and the way he recited the names of every major and minor ninja organization like a dish, didn't seem like someone with Alzheimer's. Therefore, the key issue must lie in the side effects of the Dojutsu itself. And what kind of ability was this? Uchiha Chi pondered for a moment, but upon seeing the slightly ashamed look on the old man's face, he patted him on the back and said comfortingly, "It's okay to forget it, it's okay to forget it, at least by forgetting the Mangekyo Sharingan itself, one wouldn't go blind quickly from overuse." Although only one, the Mangekyo Sharingan's basic capabilities weren't already formidable. Besides, Uchiha Chi didn't want to see this old man fight for himself and his family, exploding to the point of blindness. He had already done enough. Yet, at this moment, Uchiha Setsuna suddenly grabbed Uchiha Chi's wrist, breathing heavily, his eyes gleaming with a divine light. He said solemnly, "However, see, after entering that gap between fantasy and reality, with this eye awakened in that illusory realm that seemed like a reflection of the world, I have seen much, his eyes shone, and countless magnificent scenes, never before witnessed by Uchiha Chi, seemed to flow through his single, scarlet eye. It is a shattered, chaotic, fantasy world that defies the flow of time, from now to the Warring States period, from the Warring States period to the Sixth Paths Age era, now only a myth, from that magnificent era to a period of chaos no one remembers, the countless secret arts, countless cage-level warriors, countless treasures, submerged in the long river of time, the ten-fisted sword, the Usakani no Magatama, the sage's talisman, the six paths ninja tools, the aim no Kirakumo sword, the sacred tree, the spear of Amanuma, the flame fan, and the sky blue Susanoo even more powerful than Uchiha Madara's. I'm trapped in that world. I lost count of how many times I used my Mangekyo technique to escape. Uchiha Setsuna looked agitated, his grip on Uchiha Chi's wrist increasing with force, digging deep into his skin. Believe me, see, you must believe me, this isn't a dream, this really happened to me. He stared at Uchiha Chi with an earnest, almost morbid gaze, trying to convince him of his delirious ravings. Finally, he pulled out the yellowed, scribbled notebook from his pocket. There's evidence for this. Look at this. A complex circle of intricate spells was drawn on the notebook. The character, Sky, was inscribed on it, and below it were 4 lines of annotation. I've already set the transcription seal in advance, but I'm not sure I'll forget this. Please be sure to pass on this Mangekyo power called Eternal Heaven, this ticket to gain power beyond that of all previous ancestors, to Uchiha Chi. Uchiha Setsuna stared at Uchiha Chi, his eyes wide, the withered hand clasping his wrist trembling. I don't remember writing this note at all, nor do I remember opening the Mangekyo. I only remember those unreal pasts that seemed like a dream. If it weren't for this, listening to these words, looking at the withered hand tightly clasped around his wrist, Uchiha Chi was silent for a moment, then finally pulled the wrist around him, hugged the skinny old man, patted his back, and said in a soft yet firm tone, I understand, great elder, I believe you." Feeling this gentle embrace, Uchiha Setsuna was stunned. Soon, he laughed again, and a line of blood and tears quietly slid down the corners of his wrinkled eyes. Uchiha Chi remained silent, his heart trembling slightly. From the moment Uchiha Setsuna uttered the words Amano Spear, he knew, perhaps what he said was true. Amano Spear, a sword of the heart. A Shinto heavenly sword belonging to the six-path sage, Otsutsuki Haguramo, the forefather of the ninja. No record of its existence remained in the ninja world until the Fourth Shinobi World War, when Uchiha Obito, who had ascended to the rank of six paths after becoming the Ten-Tails Jinchuriki, revealed its legend. And yet, such top-secret information came from Uchiha Setsuna's mouth. Not to mention the other divine artifacts and sacred trees he mentioned, and the Azure Susanoo. If nothing unexpected happened, it must be the six-path sage's Susanoo, even more powerful than the perfect Susanoo, a terrifying existence capable of withstanding the Ten-Tails and Otsutsuki Kaguya. As Uchiha Chi endured a spectacular journey from the land of hot water to the land of rain, from the land of rain back to Konoha, and then from Konoha back to the land of hot water, the old man before him, in the world he described, a blend of fantasy and reality, perhaps experienced a journey even more magnificent than his own. Yet, upon returning to reality, the first thing the old man did was to forcibly dig out this gift from life and death, this power forgotten in dreams, and pass it on to him. Thinking of this, Uchiha Chi fell silent. Then, he clenched his trembling fists tightly. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.